Supremacy Games. Chapter 1126–1150. While the war was in the process of picking up its speed, the Darkin faction primogenitors didn't have an ounce of happiness in their expressions as they watched live streams of the chaos ongoing in their descendants' galaxies. Obviously, Felix hadn't attacked just the capital planets alone, but most of the important territories for his enemies. The only difference was that he sent his voidlings' armies to those planets, causing them to focus all of their fleets on destroying the voidlings to keep them as separated as possible. I don't understand how did this F***er convince the void race to turn against us when we have forced them to swear an oath on their paragon to never betray our side. Saurus gritted his teeth in anger as he watched his descendants fighting for their lives against the voidlings. In addition to maintaining secrecy on the war, the oath naturally involved a non-betrayal clause. If it wasn't for it, those three wouldn't have been so laid back when dealing with the void race. Felix might have not shown himself, but the three of them knew that he was the mastermind behind this, since no one in the void race had such big balls to attack their descendants blatantly like this. It can't be Lord Chaos, he would never bother to put himself in such fights unless he was forced. Wendigo frowned. Even if he did, he shouldn't have enough authority to free them from the Paragon's oath penalties. Only the Paragon can do that. When he said so, Saurus and Mananangal eyed each other with a hint of dread in their expression, both reaching the same conclusion. Don't tell me he woke up from his slumber and regained leadership over his toys. Well, the void race does seem too organized in their attack, like they have a legit kingly figure. Wendigo shared. They knew that those proud unique void creatures would never actually respect Arthur and listen to all of his orders. In their minds, they were fine with them making as much mayhem while killing Felix in the process. This can't be right, something else must be the answer. Saurus shook his head vehemently. The Paragon of Sins is one of the most mysterious figures in the universe, he can't just wake up and start interfering in this war. Mananangal and Wendigo nodded in agreement, knowing that the Paragon desired chaos throughout the universe, and he wasn't concerned about its origin. So, there was no need for him to change their original plan and switch the void race's enmity to them. No need to waste time discussing this. The truth will come clear when we interrogate that little shit. He must be crazy if he thought that he can launch a universal war affecting the entire alliance and get away with it unscathed. Saurus smiled coldly. The death of my favorite descendants is a small fee to pay for his execution. Fortunately, only your descendants drew the short end of the stick from this trade. Wendigo turned to look at Mananangal before asking, how is the revival going? Let me check. Mananangal replied while having a bit of his focus transferred to one of his wisps. When his vision became clear, it reflected 10 black medical pods in the shape of coffins arranged in a single line. The windows nearby showed the darkness of the cosmos as well as Linolive, appearing as small as a grain of rice near a black hole with devilish tentacles protruding from it. Mananangal ignored this sight and eyed the 10 coffins with an expressionless look. The coffins might not show a single thing, but his eyes reflected 10 pools of blood inside of them. Small humanoid embryos were seen shaping up at a noticeable speed in those blood pools. They have entered embryos stage. Mananangal informed his companions. That's good. In less than a day, they will grow into adults again. Saurus commentated. If Felix heard so, he would honestly be too dumbfounded to react. It turned out, Asna's assumption was right and that Felix had succeeded in assassinating the real Duchess Alina with the rest of the nobility. However, he had no clue that Mananangal was capable of reviving them back to their peak forms as long as he owned a large quantity of their fresh blood. Even Felix's masters didn't know that Mananangal had upgraded his ultimate ability to allow him to revive even his descendants if proper conditions were met. The only thing they knew was that his ultimate ability, True Immortality, allowed him to revive from a single drop of blood automatically. Though, Mananangal could only use his ultimate ability on his descendants, who shared a heavy percentage of his bloodline, since it helped him control it like it was his own. That's why only the top 10 nobility were involved in this revival countermeasure. As the blood primogenitor, anything related to blood was within his manipulation. When will they be at their peak after rebirth? Saurus inquired, we will need them to return to their duties as quickly as possible before that bastard causes more damages. 3 days at best. Manananggal answered, it's a bit irritating to extract memories from their bloodline and merge it with their newborn consciousness. In the case of the physical body and its properties, Manananggal had no issues with it since everything he needed was in that pool of fresh blood. However, the spirit side was the tricky part even for Manananggal. That's because Duchess Alina and others' souls were truly destroyed and had their spirits sent to the spirit realm. There was no mistake in their death. The only way for Manananggal to revive them was by creating an exact perfect living copy from their cells, just like cloning. Fortunately, bloodlines were capable of saving memories and soul threads, allowing Manananggal to be one of the few special beings capable of extracting them and using them to build similar souls with identical memories in those clones. If Lady Sphinx wasn't at odds with Manananggal, she would have reached out to pick his brains on such a remarkable ability, that allowed him to help even his descendants to ignore death. There is nothing to worry about, we can force him to stop the war easily with the council's backing. If he doesn't. Wendigo smiled coldly, it's been a while since I stomped on someone. But, what if he used those 4 traitors as key witnesses? Manananggal frowned, they must have recorded our first conversation with them. We can just threaten them beforehand. Saurus suggested with a frigid tone, they already betrayed us, but if we promised them that all will be forgiven if they kept their mouths shut, they will take the bite. Otherwise, they will truly become mortal enemies with us for the rest of their lives. There was a huge difference between making a threat and actually making a move themselves. Arthur, Miriam, Enir, and the Ruiner would never be at peace if they knew that those 3 primogenitors were actually coming for them. Neither Felix nor his masters could protect them since they really asked for it by publishing a private conversation with them and even betraying them. So, Saurus didn't hesitate to reach out to them to give them one final chance of redeeming themselves. VRRR. After a couple of rings, the call was picked up, which pleased Saurus and the other 2. However, before they could speak, a familiar voice and face forced them to wipe out their smiles. I am afraid to tell you that all of your calls are forwarded to me. Felix spoke while staring at them with an unfazed expression, you have no place to contact my subordinates ever again. You little sh*t. Saurus immediately snapped at Felix, you have no idea who you are f***ing with. If you think that your dog **t masters and Lord Cows are keeping us away from touching you, then you are hugely mistaken. Felix knew that he wasn't making empty threats. The only reason they weren't making a move personally was more out of respect to Lord Cows than fear. If they were pushed too much, they wouldn't hesitate to delete Felix and deal with Lord Cows and his masters after the deed. I am only showing you what happens when you push me to a corner. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly, you think I will remain standing as you scheme to erase my race and kill me in the process? Yes, you should have done that. Saurus remarked with a glacial expression, you have been poking the hornet nest for a long while now, and it's time for you to feel the sting. Trust me boy, it's going to hurt you more than you can imagine. Bring it on. Felix scoffed at his threat and hung up on his face, not caring any more about maintaining any respectful front. Before the Darkin faction decided to attempt killing him and his race, Felix was always dealing with them with some respect since their primary targets were his masters. But now? He would never show a weak or submissive side before them even if that was going to piss them off. This little. Saurus gritted his teeth furiously, I am going to skin him alive. Are you confident this is the smartest decision to make? Asna asked as she eyed Felix. She was a bit worried that if he kept acting this recklessly, he would end up suffering from the horns of the Darkin faction for real. Before Felix could reply, Fenrir spoke indifferently, Kid, you don't have to bow your head to them in fear. If they dared get involved in this personally, they will have to go through me first. Thank you Elder. Felix replied with an appreciative smile. He also knew that his latest actions were basically forcing the Darkin faction to attack him. Still, he really didn't want to buckle up against their pressure even when they kept making schemes to kill him left and right. I dislike fighting greatly, but if they want to mess with my favorite student, I will be left with no choice but to show them what sand is capable of. Lady Sphinx added with a stony look. Lady Sphinx's remark had taken off everyone by surprise, as they never expected such a fierce statement would come out of the most intellectual primogenitor in the universe. Master! Even Felix felt his heart start to pacify again after directly challenging 3 primogenitors. Lord Cows might be silent, but Felix understood that he also had his back. With 3 alive primogenitors in his side, he had no reason to feel afraid anymore, allowing to hold his head high when dealing with those bastards. I may not be useful in battles at the moment, but I got your back when it comes to fronting. Thor smirked. Let's see if their heat will remain the same after I talk to them in the council. With your trash talking, I think you will just worsen it. Hormungandr chided, let me do the talking. Just as Thor wanted to retort back, Lady Sphinx interjected, Aspidic has invited us to the council to discuss this war. It's expected most primogenitors will be there. It was only normal for Aspidic and the other primogenitors to group up and talk about this war. They had no clue about anything related to it, and since the Void Nation was attacking most races simultaneously, it affected them as well. Are you prepared? They will be grueling you on plenty of things related to the Void Nation. Lady Sphinx addressed Felix with a serious tone. I am ready. Felix nodded. Some time later, in the Primogenitors' Council Hall. Thank you everyone for attending on a short notice. Aspidic smiled kindly as he looked at his peers sitting throughout the circular hall in a disorderly fashion. The attendance was off the charts, as more than 15 primogenitors were here. Even Elemental Lord Cows and Lord Dune have accepted the invitation. Damn it, he really came. Saurus cursed as he glanced at Lord Cows. Is he here to keep us in check? Must be. Wendigo knitted his eyebrows. He rarely bothers to participate in those meetings. Well, it's hard to ignore your invitation when our little children are being invaded by the void forces. Jorgamo replied. Everyone nodded in agreement. Does anyone know why is this happening? Erebus frowned. I am starting to think that the Paragon of Sins has awakened and launched this invasion. Before the others could discuss his statement, Saurus interjected with an irritated tone, there is no such a thing. Seeing that the Void race have targeted your descendants fervently, I had a feeling that the 3 of you are involved in this. Kumiho giggled as she pointed at the Darkin faction members. Everyone eyed at them with intrigued expressions, feeling like they were always in the center of trouble and drama in the past years. Don't look at us like that. Wendigo said, we are the victims here. The student of those bastards was responsible over this chaotic war. Saurus supported by pointing his finger at Thor and the rest of Felix's masters with a livid expression. Is this true? Cyclope asked. He attended this meeting only because he had a feeling that Felix must have a role in it. Kumiho and the rest refrained from speaking, but their curious eyes clearly stated that they were just as eager to hear the truth. Yes. Lady Sphinx confirmed it bluntly, leaving everyone in a state of astonishment at such a revelation. You're telling me this massive void invasion is that little punk's doing? How did he make the void race submit to him? Those leeches refuse to submit to each other. Lord Cows, do you have any hand in this? Everyone gazed at Lord Cows, believing that he must have forced them to submit to Felix since he also had control over them. After all, they were made out of void energy in essence, and as the void primogenitor, he could easily enslave them. That's why he was the most feared by the void race in the entire primogenitor's circle. I have nothing to do with this. Lord Cows replied expressionlessly. This is getting interesting. Siren remarked. Everyone believed that Lord Cows was telling the truth, as he never bothered himself to lie. If he wanted to avoid answering, he just remained quiet. Since he was useless in this discussion, everyone turned to Felix's masters. Mind telling us what's going on? Erebus stated, I believe we are owed an explanation. Bring out the kid here. Saurus said coldly, our favorite descendants have been assassinated in a cowardly manner and I won't be quiet about this until I get justice. Manananggal and Wendigo knew that there was a high chance of this backfiring against them since Felix had witnesses, but they could only roll the dice and hope that those witnesses would still have a bit of fear to betray them in public and shame them. As you wish. Without delay, Lady Sphinx sent an invitation link to Felix, who accepted it in the blink of an eye. After a sudden flash of light, Felix was seen standing in the center floor of the council. He was wearing a formal blue marine suit without a tie and a slightly unbuttoned white shirt on the top. His expression showed nothing but utmost respect as he looked at all those great figures around him. Junior Felix is honored to be amidst the elders. Felix greeted politely while scanning the primogenitors' faces. Most had pleased expressions as they stared at him even though he was responsible over a universal war. This sight irritated the Darkin faction members, knowing that if it was anyone else, most primogenitors would have neutral bored expressions. Go take a seat next to your masters. Aspidicelone permitted kindly. Thanks. Felix swiftly sat down next to Lady Sphinx and spoke calmly, I would rather not waste your precious time, so I will confess everything to the best of my ability. His confidence had caught everyone by surprise, especially the Darkin faction members as they realized instantly that Felix had the witnesses on board. F***ck. They did it. With ugly expressions, they watched Felix showcase a holographic recording of them and the 4 original masterminds of the war room. The more the primogenitors heard of their discussion, the clearer the situation had become. When the recording was finished, Felix added, if you have any doubts that the recording is fabricated, I permitted Queen AI to analyze it for you. It's 100% real. Queen AI stated monotonously, causing black lines to emerge on the Darkin faction's members' foreheads. If this isn't enough, I can even bring the real witnesses here. Felix concluded with a composed expression. There is no need for that. Aspidicelone stated as he looked at Manananggal with a displeased expression, we have understood the big picture clearly. As I expected, you guys are really something special. Siren berated, I can't believe you will be mad enough to outsource a war to have such a pity revenge on a little boy. How low are you going to stoop down before you remember your identity? Erebus supported with a disgruntled tone, you make us all look bad with your **tty childish shenanigans. This is really inexcusable. Jorgamo said with a deep frown. We know that you have deep enmity with the Asgardian faction, but if you hate them that much, why aren't you making a move on them instead of targeting their student? Cherif reproached with a heated tone, how shameful. Even Lord Dune shook his head in disappointment without saying much. No one backed or supported the Darkin faction members when they finally understood that they were the ones starting this. To make matters worse, they hated the notion that 3 esteemed primogenitors were doing this much for the sake of killing a little human. In their eyes, there was nothing more embarrassing than this. It reflected poorly on them as a whole since they literally showed that some primogenitors have no issues with bullying a mortal by abusing their status. For shame. For shame indeed. They are really losing it each year. Manananggal, Wendigo, and Saurus were left with stunned looks as they kept hearing one scold after another, leaving them no space to even defend themselves. They knew that they were going to be treated bad if Felix brought out his evidence, but they had no idea that it was going to be by this much. They were somewhat right, if it was another mortal, most of them wouldn't even bother with the whole situation. But this was Felix. How could they not love him when he was constantly bringing them the best entertainment in the games? You should really start reflecting on your poor decisions lately. Aspidicelone advised the Darkin faction members. Before the others could start another round of speaking lowly about them, the short-fused Saurus snapped furiously, cut the bullsh *T already. Do you honestly think I will buckle down as I watch a mortal continue to step on me? If this was happening to you, your reaction wouldn't be any better than ours. You are really delusional if you think that you can talk yourself out of this with such a distasteful excuse. Erebus scoffed, the kid has won against 3 of my champions and lost me many ancient treasures. You don't see me throwing me a tantrum about it. Likewise, I might feel alienated because of Sphinxy, but the thought of making a move on him never crossed my mind." Kumiho winked at Felix seductively and added, "Unless, he wants me to do it." Felix immediately lowered his head with goosebumps spreading through his skin at the thought of falling in the hands of this vixen. "Face it, you guys are invested in his life now more than ever since you know that your strongest champions won't be able to defeat him in the future." Cherif huffed smoke through his burning nose in mockery. For the other primogenitors, this really didn't affect them that much as they merely desired entertainment from any source possible. However, the Darkin faction would take it as a heavy lose against the Asgardian faction, which they couldn't allow to happen. Everyone here was able to reach this conclusion. So, nothing they said was going to change their opinion on this matter and paint them as the victims. "Stop talking, you are worsening this than it is." Manananggal understood this very well, making him stop Saurus from trying to stand their grounds. "Let's just watch for now." Wendigo also went silent while having the most unfriendly look on his face. When everyone saw that they had gone silent, they also stopped with their shaming and berating. "Since both parties are here, how about we put a closure to this situation before it goes out of hand?" Aspidakelone suggested as he looked at both factions. "I have no issues with solving this diplomatically." Felix agreed. "That's good to hear." Aspidakelone smiled. Manananggal and the other 2 might not have responded, but everyone knew that they were interested in doing this as well. After all, they might not care too much about their races, but it wouldn't feel good if they ended up getting weakened to the point they became an embarrassment in the alliance. Unfortunately, Felix wasn't so merciful. "I simply want a sincere apology from them and a promise that they will never target my race," Felix requested with a solemn tone. "An apology? Ha ha ha! How bold, I love it." Kumiho was the first to laugh in amusement. "I guess this will not be solved diplomatically." Erebus chuckled. Those 2 reactions were more or less shared by the rest of the primogenitors as they stared at Felix's indifferent expression. Felix knew that a public apology in front of their peers was the greatest humiliation possible for the Darkin faction. If they agreed to it, there was no need to massacre their descendants since their pride meant 100 times more than their extinction. Before the primogenitors could voice their input on the matter, Saurus released a haunting crackle from the depth of his soul and said, "You must be really over your mind to assume that you are worthy to receive an apology from us. Gods don't apologize to mortals." Mananganel added with a faint kind smile like he was teaching Felix a basic lesson. "Is that so?" Felix smiled kindly back and suggested, "I am fine with an apology to my masters then." This stiffened Mananangal's smile as he didn't expect Felix to swiftly give up on his rights like this. Felix didn't give a sh*t about the apology itself but just humiliating those bastards as a punishment. So, he had no problems if even they apologized to a wall. "Isn't he a good lad?" Thor grinned widely as he eyed his nemesis. "Please make it as sincere as possible. Otherwise, I will make you repeat it until I am satisfied. Don't forget about me." Hormungandr jumped in with a mocking smile. "I like one too." Fenrir raised 2 fingers in the air like he was calling for a waitress. "Those mother****ers. This pissed off the Darkin faction members more than ever as they knew that Felix's masters were merely taking advantage of the situation to ridicule them. Everyone here knew that the universe would end first before those factions apologized to each other for anything. "Sigh, I tried my best." Aspidakelone shrugged his shoulders and returned to his seat, not bothering himself with meditating between them anymore. He knew that diplomacy wasn't going to work. As he expected, Manananggal soon stood up while fixing his attires. He narrowed his eyes at Felix and his masters with a sadistic smile and said, "If you want a war, then you will get one." Just as Saurus wanted to double down on his threat, Lord Cows finally opened his mouth. "I expect it to be mortals between mortals, correct?" When the Darkin faction heard so, their expression got a bit twisted, but they still answered, "Of course. We will not break our pact by interfering in mortally matters." The moment the primogenitors woke up in this era and realized that their existence was forgotten, they all made a pact to keep it this way from the public at least. Just like he had heard what he wanted, Lord Cowes bid everyone farewell and left the council immediately. This made the Darkin faction more irritated and worried than ever, since they had never seen Lord Cowes put so much focus on anything. It just had to be on the annoying splinter in their finger. "Just know this, if you dare to go too far, nothing will stop us from protecting our descendants." Manananggal left one last warning before exiting the council with his partners. "He is right, boy," Erebus advised with good intentions. "Don't seek extinction of their descendants as your goal if you want them to keep their hands off you." "I understand." Felix nodded. "Honestly, I doubt you can even pull it off." Siren shook her head. "You guys are underestimating the Alliance's forces a bit too much." "Well, I never bothered myself with their toys." Erebus scratched his chin. "Are they that good?" "Good." Siren giggled. "Check the network and see what's going on." Upon hearing so, Erebus manifested a visible holographic screen and checked on the current streams of the void invasions throughout the Alliance's territory. There were more than 100 screens, each showing an ongoing space battle between cosmic blobs and 10,000 warships firing plasma beams continuously on them. Even though the explosions were never-ending, everyone was still able to see that the Voidling's blob was getting reduced in size in a noticeable manner. Unlike the symbiotes, Voidlings had a limit to the amount of energy absorbed, and if it goes past it, they end up imploding. With that amount of never-ending shower of plasma beams and nuclear bombs, 100,000 Voidlings were dying each second. Yet, this wasn't even close to what's happening in the metal race capital planet. Oh dear! They actually created such weapons. Erebus raised an eyebrow in surprise as he watched the Voidling's cosmic blob getting erased out of existence by a frightening blinding sun much bigger than them. It all happened in second. That's their planet destroyer weapon, and it can easily harm even us if we took a direct hit from it. Siren clarified with a serious tone, "Those metalheads are developing much stronger weapons as we speak. They are really one of a kind." Erebus chuckled, still not taking them seriously. "I apologize, elders, but it looks like the situation is getting grimmer than I anticipated. I have to return to the front line." Felix swiftly bowed down and excused himself before anyone could say anything. He really took off. We have yet to ask him anything about his void forces. That weasel did so in purpose to avoid our questions. Kumiho pouted in annoyance. She was absolutely right. "If you have anything to ask, I am here," Lady Sphinx said calmly. Everyone looked at each other and begrudgingly started to teleport away, knowing that Lady Sphinx was screwing with them and would never tell them anything important. They knew that she wouldn't allow Felix to return for an interrogation, so, there was no need to remain here anymore. As for the war affecting their races as well, no one bothered to stop Felix as they were happy with the entertainment it would provide them, especially, when they knew that Felix's main targets were the Darkin faction's races. "I guess that went well." Felix sighed in relief after returning to his room. "I say it went great." Asna smiled widely. "You taught those bastards a lesson and made sure that they get pressured by the council to keep their hands to themselves. All of this without exposing anything about Nimmo. It's an absolute win." "It's not a win yet until the war ends in our favor." Felix frowned as he watched his void forces getting handed the stick by the Alliance. "I didn't expect I will be forced to start the second phase of our plan so soon. The SG Alliance really have some deep pockets." Felix had sent his Voidlings armies to hold down all the top 10 races, even the witches, elves, and sages. After all, it would bring needless suspicion for them from other parties. From those streams, he realized that 10 million Voidlings were still not enough to threaten their capital planets when all of them owned 10,000 warships worth trillions of coins each. Damn, it's been years and my new warship is still not finished. Yet, they have 10,000 of them just to protect their capital planets. Felix smiled wryly. He never thought that he would feel poor when compared to others again, but reality proved him wrong. He was earning trillions of coins for each game, while most of the revenue from all the games hosted in the alliance went to the pockets of the top 10 rulers. After all, the alliance ranks decide the revenue split in most of the alliance's free projects. Well, I wanted to avoid restoring to this, but they are asking for it. Felix swiftly switched his focus to the wisp of consciousness inside Nemo's mind. The moment he opened his eyes, he found everyone was split into squads with their officials sitting on separate tables from each other. They were clearly communicating about the war, keeping themselves instantly updated on anything arising. This was hugely beneficial in such a large-scaled war, and only the Void race was capable of doing it due to being alive when the Great Kraken shared the secrets to his ability, one soul, many lives. With their extraordinary mental fortitude, they learned it with time just like the rest of primogenitors. Candace, I want you to go public and speak on my behalf. Felix said while sitting on his throne with Nemo on his lap. Is it to make the threat? Candace frowned. It's really sooner than we anticipated. Well, we can't be exhausting our voidlings' armies on needless confrontations. Felix stated calmly. Although the Void Nation had gathered over tens of billions of voidlings in the past 7 years from many galaxies, Felix wasn't comfortable with the thought of wasting them wantonly. Even when his wrathful creators were constantly birthing them. It's time to show the Alliance how merciful we have been acting and what will happen if they pushed our patience too far. Felix said coldly. At the top of the stairway to the heavens in the UVR, the 10 rulers of the Alliance were seen sitting on their thrones above tall platforms, making them resemble overreaching gods. At the bottom of this eternal staircase, hopeless and desperate people from all kinds of races were seen trying their very best to climb it and reach those leaders for the sake of having their fate turned around. Sadly for them, the 10 rulers neither had any idea about their existence nor cared about their problems. They had hot issues on their plate to discuss, and the current alliance invasion was at the top. This is the first universal invasion we are facing from an outsider race. They are coming at us strong. High Chieftain Lakaka spoke with a sonorous voice while coiling around his chair akin to a serpent capturing a prey. I always knew that there were many intelligent void creatures among us, but I had no idea they were this many. Emperor Lokal frowned. This is really concerning. If it wasn't for the primogenitors speaking about them, they wouldn't have even known about their existence in the first place. Unfortunately, primogenitors didn't genuinely care too much about such mortally matters, making them keep a good deal of key information about the Void race to themselves. If it wasn't for so, Arthur's identity would have been exposed years ago. What I am wondering about is why did they target the vampires, gremlins, and Astrians that heavily? King Arthur inquired with a solemn tone. Do you think that maybe they have enmity with them alone, and they aren't interested in having a war with us as well? It must be. Queen Allura backed him, otherwise, they would have taken their assassination opportunity to kill any one of us. That's true. I thought so as well. In the eyes of other rulers, he was bringing legit points without any hidden motives. But in reality, King Arthur was shamelessly taking advantage of his identity to steer the conversation to his nation's favor. So, are you saying that we should sit and watch as 3 members of our inner circle get chased out of their homes? Queen Alfreda knitted her eyebrows in displeasure. I am just stating the obvious. King Arthur held his ground composedly. What we do next is up to all of us. Just as Queen Alfreda was about to reply, her expression turned grim like she heard that an uncurable plague had hit her family. Without delay, Queen Alfreda displayed a humongous hologram in front of everyone. It was showing the mesmerizing and bewitching Candace in a bit of a slutty dress streaming live in the most popular streaming site in the network. She had just started streaming for merely a minute, yet there were 100 billion viewers watching live and the numbers were increasing by the billions each second. Yet, those rulers didn't care at all about alluring beauty, which clearly had enchanted most of the thirsty viewers in the chat room. They focused on the words coming out of her cherry lips. The Void Nation has no affair with the rest of the Alliance. If you still attempt to interfere in our business with the Darkin faction, you will be leaving us with no other option but to get heavy-handed. Candace stated calmly. Who is this? Elder Dragon asked indifferently as he rested his head on his hand. I have been told that she is the spokesperson of the Void Nation. Queen Alfreda shared. I see. Elder Dragon waved his hand nonchalantly for them to carry on their discussion. Does she really thinks we will be faltering because of a single threat? King Arthur mocked. No matter how many voidlings they have, they can't stop all of our forces. They can't, but they can still paralyze our forces if they decided to flood their voidlings' armies from within our planets. Empress Emily reasoned monotonously. As the Empress of the Metal Race, she probably already analyzed all possible scenarios before she even opened her mouth. You might consider us to be monsters, but we are extremely merciful. If we were as diabolical as most of you believe, we would have started the war like this. Before anyone could react to Empress Emily's chilling conclusion, Candace proved her point with a simple virtual demonstration. It showed peaceful lively cities with tons of citizens populating them. Then, out of nowhere, hundreds of gigantic void rifts opened in the streets, in buildings, in the sky, and even under the streets. Next, millions of nightmarish void creatures flooded those cities from every single direction, spreading terror throughout every single corner. Every single viewer went completely silent as they watched those nightmarish void creatures devouring men, women, children, buildings, and anything with a hint of substance to it. The scariest part? The soldiers and other defensive countermeasures couldn't be used against them since those void creatures were mixed in with the people. It was simply a free-for-all feast for those voidlings and no one could do anything about it without endangering the lives of the citizens. This traumatizing sight made even the backs of some of those leaders to feel damp and cold, finally receiving a wake-up call at the true danger of the Void Nation. See? Aren't we good people? Candace smiled kindly. We gave you a warning when we sent our armies outside your planets when we can easily bypass all of your defenses anytime we desire. So, are you going to test our patience and kindness, or are you going to sit this one out and let us handle our business with our enemies? Candace tapped her AP bracelet and displayed her contact information. You have 24 hours to make a decision, call me if you have any questions. Bye-bye. Candace stayed true to her nature and blew a bewitching kiss at the camera before signing off. Only this time, even the thirsty viewers merely felt their blood turn cold at her playfulness after realizing that their lives were at the hands of this woman. If our leaders ignored her threat, doesn't this mean a void creature can emerge right next to my bed at any second? *CK this, I am leaving with my family to hide in less populated planet. Oh God, oh God, oh God, this is so scary. How did we even make such enemies? I ain't putting my life in the hands of those greedy bastards. I'm getting as far as possible from my home. Even though the stream was shut down, the chat rooms were exploding with negative comments. Everyone was scared **+ when they were finally reminded that the Void Nation could easily kill them whenever they desired. When this stream went even more viral and started popping off on everyone's feed for the next couple of minutes, a new level of hysteria and chaos was created in even untargeted planets. Almost everyone dropped whatever they were doing and started packing their stuff to completely ditch their planets or just their cities. When it came to life and death decisions, it was only natural to feel more safe with your own decision than allowing a government handle it, especially when you never trusted them with anything in the first place. God damn it! How can we salvage this situation and turn it to our favor? King Arthur cursed furiously as he displayed many holographic streams of the ongoing chaos in his empire's cities. Good, 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 feel even more hopeless and falter to our pressure. He grinned widely with his own main consciousness as he watched his peers' faces turn a bit ugly at the chaotic sight in his cities. He was really a master when it comes to emotions as he was feeling completely two opposite emotions with two different consciousnesses, making it impossible for Queen AI to find out about his truth. We have to call her for negotiation. Queen Alfreda stated with a solemn tone, they have given us an entire day to come up with a decision because they knew that the longer we prolong this, the more chaos will arise in our cities. In the end, they won't even need to do anything and let our citizens fight each other over escaping the planet. Her reasoning was spot on. Felix understood that in war, it was much easier to turn the people on their governments if the right conditions were met. By giving them an entire day, everyone would be pressuring their own governments and monarchies to give up on participating in this war for the sake of saving themselves. After all, the safety of those three races meant absolutely nothing to them when their own safety was put in the crossfire. I refuse to bow down to anyone. Elder Dragon declared coldly, I dare them to release those voidlings in my cities. Easier for you to say when most of your cities are populated by slaves and workers. Queen Allura narrowed her eyes. Clearly, you have no issues with sacrificing them for your pride. It was quite true, since all dragons were capable of taking care of themselves in case of an internal void invasion. Since all of them couldn't care less about the lives of their workers and slaves, the Void Nation's threat fell on deaf ears. I am in favor of accepting their deal. Empress Scarlet shared with a peaceful hypnotic voice that echoed in everyone's ears 3 times, reaching the depth of their souls. As the mother of the Hive race and possessor of the second strongest army in the universe, her say in the meeting carried a lot of weight. Really, Scar? Really? Elder Dragon eyed Empress Scarlet with a displeased expression. I apologize, but I would rather not be an enemy of a race capable of opening void rifts in my baby's chamber and slaughter them anytime they desired. Empress Scarlet remarked softly, I can accept anything from this alliance but endangering my babies. With Empress Scarlet current appearance that resembled a beautiful humanoid honeybee queen, it didn't seem like she could be giving birth to many babies. But in reality, Empress Scarlet's true appearance in the real world would make anyone scared shitless as her size toppled hundreds of kilometers. She was laying millions of eggs with all types of intelligent hive insects each minute. Her main priority and duty was nursing those eggs until they hatch. So, her motherly instincts forbid her from doing anything that would endanger her eggs, which would in turn endanger the longevity of her race. After all, the Hive race had the shortest lifespan compared to most races. Just as Elder Dragon was going to add another input, King Arthur swiftly interjected, how about we reach out to them first before making any rash decisions? Since they haven't started killing anyone wantonly, it implies that they might have interest to join the alliance as their end goal. When they heard so, everyone had a slight change of expression. It was a positive change. You might be right. Queen Allura asserted, if we get them to join us, it will be a massive boost to our strength as an alliance. Don't forget their abilities to travel through the Void Realm. Emperor Lockle rubbed his beard, they will be a great addition in the transportation system. It's not really the worst idea. Even Queen Alfreda thought about it carefully, we can hire their services to clear up the voidlings attacking our galaxies and other cosmic dangerous entities by expelling them in the Void Realm. You guys really have gone mad. High Chieftain Lokaka reproached with a disgruntled tone, they clearly wants to destroy 3 important members of our alliance. What will other members think of us if we allow this to happen? Like you care about their opinions. King Arthur sneered, you are just opposing this because you're afraid that your race will lose monopoly on the transportation system if they joined us. How dare you accuse me of such thing? High Chieftain Lokaka fumed. Unfortunately, the other rulers were smart enough to reach the same conclusion as King Arthur, so, they didn't take his morally stance seriously. You can argue all you want, I'm calling her right now. Queen Alfreda swiftly dialed the contact information of Candace. After a couple of rings, the call was picked up and Candace's bewitching face was in front of everyone. Greetings, leaders of the free universe. Looks like those old fogies aren't interested in taking part in this. Candace smiled charmingly as she scanned the faces of all 9 rulers. There is no need for them to get involved in such a small matter. Minister Aquarius replied with a gruff, stern tone. Unlike most heavenly turtles that Felix had met, Minister Aquarius had real signs of aging on his face, making him resemble an aged turtle, who experienced myriad of events in his life. Small matter or big matter will be decided after 24 hours. Candace stressed casually. Is that so? High Chieftain Lakaka growled from the depth of his throat while giving Candace a death stare. Before things could get sidetracked for the worst, Queen Allura mentioned with a faint polite smile, "You said that you are the spokesperson of the Void Nation. Doesn't that mean you have a leader? Why isn't he the one talking to us? He is on a sick leave." Candace brushed off her question and asked, "Do you have any other questions?" Since she didn't seem interested in talking about the leader, the rulers could only move on even though this didn't please them one bit. Especially Elder Dragon, as he felt his pride pinched by the thought of being forced to address the spokesperson instead of the leader. But, he kept his displeasure within and listened to their discussion with a cold stare. "I want to know, why are you targeting the vampires, Astrians, and gremlins?" Queen Alfreda inquired. "Let's say they have wronged us," Candace answered without giving any explicit details. This irritated the rulers since they couldn't reach out to those races' leaders and get the real truth. After all, the three races had all of their upper authority figures wiped out, leaving only the Gremlins king alive. But, they were unable to contact him anytime soon as he was amidst an active invasion and had no time to talk to anyone. "Are you seeking to slaughter them all, or what?" King Arthur asked. "We're not such monsters." Candace smiled, "As long as they surrender and hand off their territories to us, we will end this war without any other fatalities." This news pleased some rulers and irritated others. "What do you guys think? If we can convince our members to surrender peacefully and give them refuge in our territories, everyone will get out of this victorious." King Arthur suggested telepathically, "No one will die needlessly, and we can use this opportunity to force them to join the alliance." In terms of rationality, this was the smartest and most beneficial decision to make for the alliance as a whole. They literally had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The only ones losing would be Darkin faction races, but no one really cared that much about them when the situation had already developed to this point. "You forgot that all of those three races have primogenitors behind them," Minister Aquarius stated calmly. "I doubt they will allow their races to go extinct or surrender to anyone even if we wanted this to work out this way." "That's true." King Arthur acted like he was in a deep thought process before adding, "Well, if they would rather not surrender, it's not really our fault, is it now? We also have our people we need to protect at all cost. I don't know about you guys, but I refuse to sacrifice probably billions of civilians for the sake of another race even if they were a member of the alliance." "I believe so as well." Queen Allura shook her head, "My sisters can't protect themselves, and I know that if my cities got invaded in that manner, we will be losing millions of witches. Neither can I afford such a loss nor the alliance, and you know it." Emperor Local felt the same, knowing that as a pure utilitarian race, they would end up emerging from this war with the most fatalities compared to the dragons, space worms, heavenly turtles, and such. So, it was in his biggest interest to make this deal happen at all costs. As much as I hate to admit it, I have to say that this enemy really makes all of our defensive measures obsolete." Queen Alfreda sighed, "I am not too scared of them since we live on Mother's tree body, and she can easily kill anyone she desired if they threatened her body. But, we can't afford to put our witches, dwarves, sages, and other utility races in such a grave danger. The entire economic system of the alliance would collapse and everything else would fall after it shortly, making us get hit with the worst recession period in history." "That's true. Those three races might not be able to fight, but they were the backbone of the alliance's economy. After all, potions, artifacts, and even scrolls were being utilized on daily basis by almost everyone. Since each field touches upon hundreds of other areas, if it fell it would bring with it everything like a domino effect. For example, without potion making, beast hunters' occupation and its market would take a massive hit, as well as the cultivation plants for common and rare materials. Even explorers seeking those materials in the wilderness would be reduced immensely since the demand for them would hit rock bottom. Let's ask her first if they are genuinely interested in joining the alliance," King Arthur said, still taking the lead of the conversation to always keep it in the Void Nation's favor. "You want us to stay outside this war, but you have to give us more than just a threat. Queen Alfreda said with a solemn tone, what will guarantee us that you won't target other members when you deal with your current targets? Fair point. Candace smiled, what do you suggest then? Queen Alfreda looked at the others before proposing, we want your nation to join the alliance and be operated at the same rules as all of us. We don't like being tied with your rules. Candace frowned, so, unless you are offering more than that, I am afraid I will have to decline in the name of the Void Nation. Felix might have told Candace to prioritize joining the alliance, but she wasn't dumb to accept the first offer they propose. In her eyes, they weren't the ones desperate to join the alliance should be desperate to include them for their own long-term safety. After all, even if this war didn't go well for the Void Nation, the rest of the alliance would still feel at edge for the rest of their lives after being shown what they were capable of. Queen Alfreda, Queen Allura, and the rest knew this damn well. The only ones uncaring about this were Elder Dragon and High Chieftain Lakaka. Even Empress Emily believed that the most rational and beneficial decision for her race was having the Void Nation join them. After all, she wanted her race to focus on seeking the truth of the universe instead of worrying about void creatures creeping up on them at any given moment. What you do guys want from the alliance then? Queen Allura tested the waters. First, we feel like with our strength, capabilities, and even utilities provided, we deserve to have a spot in the top 10 rulers. Candace smiled, don't you think so as well? Absolutely preposterous. High Chieftain Lakaka snapped furiously, you think we are giving out ranks like some sort of candy? The only way to earn a spot is by possessing enough SG points. There are no shortcuts. In other words, the Void Nation would need to climb the alliance ranks just like everyone else by providing contributions or fighting in the racial games to earn more SG points. Candace knew that if they took this path, it would take them decades if not more of effort to finally replace the lowest ranked race in top 10. No shortcuts. Candace giggled in amusement, I may not be too familiar with the alliance rules, but it doesn't mean that I am uneducated. What are you talking about? I am talking about rule number 33, section race ranks, in the book of SG Alliance rules. Candace shared with a casual tone, it states that in case of an approved war breaking out between two or more races in the alliance, the winner will be promoted to the highest rank between the parties involved. Since the vampires are ranked in top 19, gremlins in top 23, and lastly Istrians in top 13, my nation would replace the Istrians. Candace blinked, isn't that a shortcut? High Chieftain Lakaka might have a worm face with just antennas and a mouth, but it still got twisted in resentment after his bluff got called out. Still, he swiftly got control over his emotions and fired back, unless you are blind, the rule clearly state that parties involved needs to be in the alliance for it to be applied. I know, that's why you will be having a motion to reform that rule to include also parties not in the alliance. Candace smiled, I believe such rules can be changed if the majority of the races in the inner circle of the alliance voted in favor. You. High Chieftain Lakaka was left tongue-tied at the realization that Candace wasn't here to fuck around, no matter how slutty she looked. Felix didn't choose her as the spokesperson just due to his trust, he knew that she was a serious person, who absolutely disliked being taken advantage of. So, she had already read and gone through everything to ensure that the Void Nation would come out of this meeting without being ripped off. Convincing the inner circle to make such amends for the race attacking 3 of their peers isn't going to easy. Queen Alfreda mentioned. Oh, just tell them that whoever didn't approve will be paid a visit by us. Candace smiled kindly, I believe that none of them will rebel against the decision anymore. Well, she has a point. If they truly took down those 3 races simultaneously, no one in the inner circle will be brave enough to offer themselves next even if they were disgruntled. King Arthur supported. That's true. Plus, giving them 13 rank isn't so bad. How isn't it bad? High Chieftain Lakaka reproached, it's 3 ranks away from replacing the Sage race. I am certain that with their strength and utilities, they will replace them eventually with a bit of effort. That's true as well. Queen Allura asked as she eyed King Arthur, "Are you really okay with this?" Everyone turned to stare at King Arthur, knowing that none of them would be fine with losing their ruling position to anyone, even if it meant going into war with the Void Nation. Seeing everyone's eyes on him, King Arthur smiled bitterly and said, "I am obviously not okay with this. But, is there any other solution besides going into war with them?" No one said anything. "If it was any other enemy, I wouldn't have batted an eye to suggest we fight to the death, but..." King Arthur sighed helplessly, "Their ability to bypass all of our defensive measures and kill anyone they desire is already scary enough for me. Don't even mention their ability to flood our cities with their monsters. So, if the only way to protect my race and everyone else from those abominations is by risking my ruling position, I am fine with it, I really am," King Arthur reassured with a soft smile, appearing like a soldier about to sacrifice himself for his squad. "This snake is really on another level." Asna couldn't help but roll her eyes as she watched this meeting with Felix through Candace's consciousness link. "That's why he is the councilman of the imitators." Felix chuckled, "Not even Elder Dragon can find a single ounce of deceit in his face or tone, he is that good. I never thought you will be this sensible." Queen Alfreda smiled as she eyed King Arthur, "I might have misjudged you. I am just doing what any of you would have done." King Arthur answered. Everyone glanced at each other before agreeing fervently to his statement, knowing damn well that none of them would be as accepting as him. He even tried to guilt-trip them. Felix was left speechless. They might not show it, but Felix knew that King Arthur had caused them to feel a bit of guilt for his situation. Naturally, Elder Dragon, High Chieftain Lakaka, and the Empresses couldn't care less, but the others were affected. This was going to help King Arthur big time. "How about we make our decision now?" King Arthur suggested, "I believe most of us in favor of the deal, so there is no need to prolong this and cause more chaos in our cities to arise needlessly." "I agree." "Likewise." "My thoughts exactly." As expected, the majority wanted to finalize the deal right now, not because of the reasons stated by him, but because they believed that King Arthur might have a change of mind if they gave him more time to think about it. They had no clue that King Arthur, Candace, and Felix were hoping for them to accept their deal as quickly as possible before they get exposed. Felix wasn't delusional enough to believe that the Darkin faction primogenitors would keep their intel about the war to themselves. However, since they couldn't interfere in mortally matters at all, they weren't able to rat on Felix to the 10 rulers. They were bound to be found out by the rest of the primogenitors when their descendants would come to ask for their confirmation. This would shatter their already broken reputation in the primogenitors' council. Felix knew that the only method for them to be helpful was if their descendants released the information to the 10 rulers, and they backed it up. Unfortunately, Felix had taken down all the authoritative figures and pressured the others so hard with the invasion, they wouldn't have time to even scratch their ass. That's why Miriam, Mammon, and a couple of annihilation fiends were doing their very best to keep Gremlin's King Teardog from touching his AP bracelet. How distasteful! Elder Dragon sneered coldly, "Why bother have such an alliance if we will roll over at the first enemy we meet? We have no time to garner to your wounded pride or repeat our reasons for taking this deal." Queen Alfreda asserted calmly, "Voice your vote and beat it." Elder Dragon might be the strongest in the alliance and considered as the big boss by the public, but in this council? No one really feared him or respected him with the authority of having 2 votes. After all, he couldn't even care about his own race when his pride was on the line, why would he care about other races? So, most of the decisions he made were always on the selfish side. Fortunately, even though he was the only one with 2 votes, the others were rational to always take the smartest decision for the benefit of the entire alliance as a whole. 9 votes always beats 2. Tisk, if this is the path you chose, then keep me out of this nonsense. Elder Dragon huffed in displeasure and logged off instantly, not bothering to even voice his votes. What's his issue? Candace titled her head in confusion at his early departure. Don't mind him. Queen Allura informed, we have come a decision to accept your deal. You have made the right decision. Candace smiled. Since only High Chieftain Lakaka and Elder Dragon opposed to this deal, there was no need to start a voting process. As for the 10th unknown ruling power, since they weren't participating in this meeting, their voting was voided and could be ignored. The same applied if one would rather not vote. It was done like this, so no one would be holding major decisions hostage by not voting. However, we still would like to iron some details before making it official. Queen Alfreda stated. Of course. As starters, we would like to have no part in this war, so, you have to keep your forces attacking us to make a strong case that we can't provide assistance to our members. Queen Alfreda disclosed cunningly. Since only the inner circle of the alliance were forced to provide military assistance to other members, the only way to bypass this rule was by being attacked as well. It didn't matter if just one planet or hundreds were attacked, the rule book stated clearly that reinforcement must be provided only when their own safety wasn't endangered. In fact, just the threat of releasing void creatures in their cities could be used to make a strong case to avoid helping the Darkin faction. Looks like they want us to keep attacking from space to put a display to save some face water while at the same time reducing our voidlings at a steady pace. Felix narrowed his eyes. How cunning. Felix knew that this condition was going to be a major pain in the ass since they would be forced to keep releasing voidlings on 30 races. This would in turn make it more difficult to prolong this war since their forces would be exhausted at a rapid pace. Felix understood as well that the alliance would be the ones winning from this condition whether the war ended quickly or not. But, he could only agree to it since he had to give them something in those negotiations. If he didn't want the negotiations to go smoothly, he would have reduced the deadline to merely an hour. This would force the alliance to take the drastic decision of going to war regardless of what. Candace, agree to their term. We will do our best to put a good show for your people. Candace answered. Good, we also want you to retract your threat without involving our deal for now. Queen Alfreda added. People might be smart enough to figure out by themselves that the alliance must have made a deal with the Void Nation, but the alliance would never admit it outright. We are fine with that as well. One last crucial detail. Queen Alfreda narrowed her eyes. Leave the civilians of your enemies outside the war. Aren't you asking too much of us? Candace stated indifferently, this is still a war, and we will use any measures available to win it. If they wanted to use their civilians as shields, they will leave us with no choice but to act upon it. Felix knew that there was limit to how much merciful you could be in wars. For example, allowing the civilians 5 days to evacuate was his limit. If the Darkin faction refused to allow their own people to evacuate, that wasn't his problem. The rulers could see that Candace wasn't planning to budge on this condition. We already gave up on them, we have no right to interfere in their lives anymore. King Arthur pressured, so, let's not act like we are some self-righteous white knights and just sign the damn deal. This was the last nail in the coffin. No one dared to disagree with him, knowing that they would appear as nothing more than hypocrites. After all, they couldn't throw their people to the wolves and tell the wolves how to eat them. So, they could only drop this condition and voice their final approval of the deal. Great, how do you like to proceed? Candace inquired. Since we can't be signing any major contracts with an outsider without including the entire inner circle in the decision, how about we take ancestral oaths for a temporal deal? Queen Allura suggested. It will work on us, but how can we trust that it will work on them? We aren't even addressing the real leader. High Chieftain Lakaka grumbled. You're really delusional if you thought that we will break an oath we make on the primogenitor's names. Candace sneered, if it wasn't for our respect to them, we wouldn't have allowed you to create this alliance in the first place. This was quite true since the Void race exited even before the foundation of the alliance. If it wasn't for them fearing and respecting the primogenitors, they would have already owned the universe and everyone on it eons ago. I guess we can concede that to you, but what about your leader? Queen Alfreda stressed, we aren't going with this deal unless he took the oath before us. We thought you will say that. Candace smiled and displayed a pre-made video, showing a humanoid dark misty figure with merely 3 purplish eyes on his face. With a sonorous voice that seemed to have come from the depth of an abyss, the figure made a bold statement, "I swear on the names of the primogenitors that as the king of the Void Nation to accept the agreed-upon conditions of the deal between my nation and the Alliance until we sign a contract to join forces for good." The moment he finished with the oath, the pre-recorded video stopped playing. "Your turn." Candace smiled charmingly. The rulers glanced at each other for a few moments at the end of the video, seeming like they all shared the same thought. Did he record this video just now or before the start of the war? If the answer was the latter, it entailed the terrifying truth that the Void Nation had planned almost everything and accounted even to their reaction and proposed conditions. If he has such an extraordinary foresight, he really must be someone special. Queen Alfreda remarked with a solemn tone. "It doesn't surprise me." Empress Emily interjected expressionlessly, "If the leader wasn't a great and fearful figure, the Void race would have never united under his rulership." "That's true." Before they could dive deeper into this discussion, Candace stated calmly, "We are waiting." Candace wasn't worried that the Alliance would pull back and leave Felix to be bound by the oath. She knew that it only worked if both parties made it. Though, she was worried about something occurring at this moment that could ruin their deal if they delayed it any further. "I will start." King Arthur swiftly took the same oath as Felix before his partners could say anything. When he was done, the others were left with no choice but to stay to their word and do the same. Even High Chieftain Lakaka took the oath while he was still displeased by this cooperation. "Good, how about the remaining 2? Candace asked with a satisfied smile. "You don't have to worry about neither of them." Queen Alfreda clarified, "The Watchers aren't interested in such matters." While Elder Dragon had stated that he wouldn't be bothering himself anymore with this war, he always stays to his word. "That's good enough for us." Candace added, "You will be responsible over updating the rest of the inner circle races. You should retract your threat publicly as quickly as possible." Queen Allura stressed. "Will do." Candace winked at everyone and wished, "Let's work hard for a better future. I really wish you weren't saying this while amidst a war with our members." King Arthur smiled wryly. "Well, there can never be a perfect situation, bye-bye." Candace blew a kiss to King Arthur and hung up the call. After she left, High Chieftain Lakaka remarked with an annoyed tone, "I am still against this and I have a firm belief that you will regret this decision in the future." Without waiting for their response, he exited the council. The others didn't mind his words much, knowing that what's done was done. There was no point in thinking too much about what this decision would lead to in the future when their hands were pretty much tied to accept it either ways. They are at least somewhat sincere in their actions. Queen Allura mewed as she displayed a new stream of Candace. This time, the moment she went live, almost 10 trillion viewers received notification and joined the stream instantly. Without an ounce of hesitation, Candace stated with her usual charming smile, "After noticing that many innocent civilians are suffering from the chaos arising in their cities, we realized that we couldn't do this anymore. We are going to find other ways to pressure the Alliance to stay out of our war without endangering and affecting the civilians' lives, who had nothing to do with this. What I am trying to say," Candace shared with the most sincere and softest tone she could muster, "you guys don't need to leave your homes anymore. We give you our words that not a single void creature is going to touch you, not now, not ever." Immediately after hearing so, the chat rooms exploded with cheers and grateful messages flying all over the place directed at none other than the Candace and the Void Nation as a whole. Some were even glorifying the Void Nation and calling them as the good guys while talking sh*t at the Alliance for not having the same morality as them. Who could blame them for feeling this way? Just a short while ago, they were feeling like there was a judgment sword placed right beside their neck at every moment. They were just immensely grateful that it was lifted off, not caring in the slightest that it was from the ones putting it in the first place. When most rulers saw this, their eyebrows couldn't help but twitch in irritation. Those bastards really made themselves look like saints while painting us as the villains. King Arthur cursed. It doesn't matter to me as long as my babies are safe. Empress Scarlet expressed softly. Me neither, come on, we have work to do. Queen Alfreda swiftly contacted all the leaders in the inner circle, wanting to update them on the situation. Since Felix was the current approved representative of the human race as a whole, he was called as well instead of the Bardo or the Mariana Federation councilman. I guess it's my turn. Felix said with a serious tone as he eyed the invitation link while sitting next to Asna. You might get caught there, are you sure about going? Asna asked. I am bound to get exposed eventually and get sued by them. Felix shrugged his shoulders, might as well be there to handle the situation on my own. Felix knew that the only reason he wasn't finding a problem with the alliance in general was because Queen Ai had no right to report his transgressions when his actions represented the Void Nation instead of the Mariana Federation. Since the Void Nation was an outsider force without any contractual duties to the alliance, his actions against the Darkin faction could be dealt with only if his enemies made a strong case with evidence to back it up. Only then would the Queen Ai be allowed to punish Felix based on the rules. In this case, it would be with jail time instead of straightforward execution. After all, Queen Ai's executions could happen only if contracts were involved that enforced it. All in all, everyone was free to behave as they desired without worrying about Queen Ai ratting on them, giving them complete freedom to do crime. However, if they got caught and the evidence supported their crimes, Queen Ai would turn against them instantly based on the rules. If the rules weren't like this, no one would dare to touch an AP bracelet in their lives since Queen Ai would turn into the police within everyone's heads. Obviously, the upper echelon didn't want this since it affected them more than the commoners. How could they do their corrupted work when they knew that Queen Ai could jail them immediately? In a short while, the 10 rulers' council at the top of the heavenly staircase was turned into a assembly hall with tens of platforms arranged based on the current racial ranks. Each platform had a giant emblem of the race painted on the front while their rank at the back. All of this was done to keep everyone on a united understanding that hierarchy mattered the most in the alliance and everyone should strive to improve their rank. If everyone worked hard, the alliance as a whole would benefit the most even if the ranks remained the same. Soon, flashes of light kept occurring all over the assembly hall until most seats were filled. Even Felix had teleported in time to scout the situation beforehand. This is quite surreal to be honest. Felix thought to himself as he eyed the kings and queens of the top 30 races in the alliance. There was the Werewolves King, the Pandians High Honor, the Fisherman Queen and representative of the entire marine race, the Fukins Lord, the Shadowborn's ruler, the Spider-Kin's princess, the Fog Crawler's emperor, the Fairies' matriarch, and more. With the addition of the remaining 8 rulers, this assembly was exhibiting such a massive authoritative pressure, commoners wouldn't dare to lift their heads in their presence. Here he was Felix sitting at the 25th chair and representing the human race among the most respectful leaders of the free universe. How could it not be surreal? If only the old me could see me now, he will honestly pass out in shock. Felix chuckled to himself while sizing up those kings and queens. Almost everyone were also either sizing him up or keeping their eyes on the empty seats of the Darkin faction. How are you doing, Felix? Fairy Matriarch asked with a friendly smile as she sat on top of Felix's shoulder. Never better. And you? Felix smiled as he offered his finger for a handshake with the Fairy Matriarch. With the tear of the goddess you gave me, I have been feeling like a young fairy again. Fairy Matriarch giggled happily while shaking Felix's finger with both of her small hands. Her cute reaction caused Felix to feel warm inside since he never saw her at this size before. The last time Felix met her in the fairy's dimensional pocket, he had to drink their weird solution that reduced his size to match them. I have also been finding a lot more success only because of your amazing fairy ritual. Felix likewise showed appreciation. I know, I have been watching you create trouble left and right. Fairy Matriarch chuckled as she returned to sitting on his shoulder. Trouble? You have to see me at my final form. Felix's eyelids twitched after imagining Fairy Matriarch's expression when she realized that he was the mastermind behind this universal war. Before Fairy Matriarch could ask for more details, Queen Allura sent a telepathic message to both of them. Sorry about interruption, but I have to ask my little junior something. Let's talk later. Fairy Matriarch understood that she wanted a private discussion with Felix, so, she flew near his cheek and gave him a friendly kiss before returning to her massive seat. Little brat, are you related to this war? Queen Allura jumped right into the main subject. I have no idea what you are talking about. Felix chuckled. Are you avoiding making me an accomplice by not telling me anything? Or you really have nothing to do with this? Queen Allura narrowed her eyes at him. I really have nothing to do with this. Felix trusted that Queen Allura was on his side as she was his senior sister and knew that she had his back regardless of what. However, he still refused talking about this subject to her since she was one of the 10 rulers. Unlike him, her contract was much stricter than the one he signed with the Federation. Felix was extremely intelligent back in the days to sign a contract that made him more or less just a counselor for the Mariana Federation instead of making himself the leader or even emperor. At that point, no one would have argued against him when he had tens of millions of voidlings behind him. But Felix always knew that if he signed such a strict contract, it would confine him to the alliance forever since he would be a king and be subjected to new stricter rules for the services of the alliance. Queen Allura, King Arthur, and the rest of the leaders were all under this strict contract, which made it impossible for them to even start small fights without having Queen Ai involved. That's why King Arthur needed to tread on ice with being a double agent, forcing him to have complete control over thoughts and emotions at all the time. Felix knew that if he told Queen Allura about the war, she would not have the same masterful control as King Arthur, something that only psychopaths owned. So, he might as well keep her in the dark as much as possible. You know that I can ask Master about this. Queen Allura said. Then do it. Felix chuckled, knowing that Lady Sphinx had no intentions of playing a messenger between her students. As he expected, Queen Allura didn't dare to ask Lady Sphinx about this, leaving her to read in peace within her consciousness space. You little punk, just wait until you visit the palace. Queen Allura got annoyed. I will make sure to discipline you as your senior sister. I can't wait. Just as Queen Allura was about to scold Felix for his continuing to speak back, King Arthur announced loudly, We have waited enough, it's unfortunate, but it looks like even King Jagat will not be joining us. So, what decision have you made with the Void Nation for them to back off on their initial threat? Fisherman Queen Everly asked what was on everyone's mind. Most of the public might have been fooled by Candace's B*shit in the second live stream, but not them. Queen Alfreda took it upon herself to update them on the entire deal with the Void Nation from A to Z. Most were pleased with their decision while the rest felt that more could have been done. Still, no one completely spoke against it since they were also rational and ruthless enough to understand that their safety always comes first. So, as per with the conditions, we will reform the rule to add non-alliance members, so the Void Nation will be able to get the spoils of the war legally as well the Astrians rank. The werewolves King Tresnor said while grinning from ear to ear, I am completely fine with that. As the mortal enemy of the vampires, he was at 9 clouds with this whole war ongoing. I don't understand why you are so happy. Shadowborn's ruler Hogan eyed him weirdly. Aren't you worried about the Void Nation taking over the vampires' territory after the war? Not so much. Werewolves King Tresnor replied, they will be getting 2 other galaxies as well from Astrians and Gremlins. With their low numbers, I firmly believe that they will be interested in making a deal with us to trade off the vampires' territory. He is right. Felix smirked. He had planned to hand off the vampires' territory to the werewolves for nothing but their eternal loyalty. After all, werewolves and winterwolves were Fenrir's descendants. Felix would rather have them in his side just like their ancestor without ripping them off. I have a feeling that they might want to trade off other territories since 2 galaxies is just too big for them. Spiderkin's Princess Valerie added with a high-pitched voice. When everyone heard so, greed almost manifested in a solid form from their eyes. In this universe, deserted galaxies were everywhere, but no one cared about them as much as already civilized galaxies. After all, they were mapped out and their foundation was already built in terms of transportation systems and such. This implied that civilized territories were 100 times more desirable, don't even mention territories of such high-ranked races. Just as everyone was about to start a heated discussion on ripping off territories from the Void Nation, a sudden flash of light forced them to quieten down. Everyone's first reaction was to glance at Gremlin's seat, believing that it was King Jagat. However, their eyes were forced to move just slightly to the right after realizing that the source of the light came from the vampire's seat. When the flash of light disappeared, everyone was left with stunned and aghast expressions. Impossible! Even Felix exclaimed loudly in disbelief while almost jumping from his seat. Who could blame him for such reaction? The newly arrived leader was none other than the breathtaking Duchess Alina. She manifested before everyone while wearing the same dress when she died. It was completely stained with blood, making her resemble a true undead with her pale skin. After Felix's eyes made contact with Duchess Alina's sunken eyes, she smiled creepily and said, "I am back." Felix rarely got scared, but this freakish unbelievable sight had truly sent chills down to his last spinal cord. 10 minutes ago, inside the invisible spaceship away from Linoliv, the 10 black medical pods cracked open slightly and emitted a burst of bloodish smoke, then, it slid to the side and exposed 10 naked pale beautiful vampires lying on unfilled pools of blood. "Wake up!" Manananggal ordered coldly. Just like they received a verdict from God himself, all of them snapped their eyes wide open. Yet, there was a clear hint of disorientation and confusion in the way their eyes moved around. Arg! Arg! In less than a second, all of them started howling in agony as they held their heads tightly after being assaulted by one of the nastiest headaches they ever experienced. Some of them even started to flail around in the coffin-like medical pod, resembling fish on water. Only Duchess Alina managed to stifle her scream a second later and go through the process with a stone-cold expression. After a minute or so, the pain gradually eased up, and their beating brains had finally calmed down. When it was over, Duchess Alina forced herself to sit up in the medical pod even though she felt like her entire body was made out of gummy bears. "The process of revival hasn't finished yet." Manananggal ordered her, "Go back in the pool." Duchess Alina did as she was told without making a peep. After most of her memories were restored, she knew that her ancestor was extremely pissed off at her. She guessed right. "For you to die in such a disgraceful manner, I would have preferred to keep you dead," Manananggal stated frigidly while sitting in front of them. Neither Duchess Alina nor the rest of the upper nobility dared to reply, knowing that their ancestor hated nothing more than excuses. They knew that they would be courting death if they blamed some assassination on their ancestor. After all, it worked perfectly against them only because they were never worried about the Void Race making a move on them. Their ancestors were the ones telling them that the Void Race were on their side and would never betray them due to the oath taken. "So, just because I revived you, it doesn't mean that you are safe from death," Manananggal remarked. "If you dare disappoint me in this war, I will be the one finishing you off to avoid bringing me any more disgrace." "Understood." "Yes." Duchess Alina and the rest replied in unison even though they were still clueless about many matters related to their death. The only reason they knew that the Void Race was responsible over their death was because the last thing they sensed was spatial disorder behind their backs. Since space worms couldn't have attacked them, nothing much was left for imagination. "I intended to wake you up after the complete revival process, but time can't be wasted anymore," Manananggal mentioned with a cold stare. "The Asgardian punk is taking advantage of our inability to interfere to manipulate the alliance. I need you to set the record straight before he gets his clutches on them." Before Duchess Alina could ask for more information since everything sounded somewhat confusing, Manananggal transformed his fingers into tiny blood needles and instantly stabbed them in the foreheads. Arg! Arg! This set another wave of painful screams as everyone had their eyes rolled at the back of their heads while having a new set of foreign memories forcefully get placed in their brains. This was an advanced blood ability called Memory Bloodline Transferal, as it allowed Manananggal to pick whatever memories he wanted from his brain and store them into his bloodline before injecting it to the subject's dot. After the process was over, Duchess Alina, Marquis Sebastian, and the rest of the upper nobility had no more confusion on their faces. Only pure rage and fury after seeing their capital planet being on the verge of being devoured and the rest of the planets getting assaulted by many armies of void creatures. What's worse, no one was there to lead against the whole invasion, forcing the vampires' commanders and governors on other planets to focus purely on their planet's survival. Landlord. Absolutely livid, Marquis Sebastian bit his lips so hard they started bleeding as he envisioned the face of the main culprit. Meanwhile, Duchess Alina buried all of her emotions deeply in her heart and requested with an expressionless tone, "May I receive an AP bracelet?" Manananggal threw 10 AP bracelets inside the coffins and returned to his seat, not bothering to say anything else. Duchess Alina and the rest swiftly wore their AP bracelets and got connected again with Queen Ai. However, because they died, and they were now working with a new main consciousness, they were forced to go through identification process again. Obviously, this meant that all of their upstanding contracts were voided automatically. In other words, Duchess Alina wasn't the leader of the vampire race anymore or had any relation to the alliance. Fortunately, they had placed countermeasures for such scenario. "Ancestor, I need your help with restating me on the leading position," Duchess Alina requested. Manananggal commanded Queen Ai to recover everyone's positions at once. The countermeasure was simply giving Manananggal authority to place anyone in leadership without caring about democracy or the opinion of anyone. Since Duchess Alina wrote those terms in the contracts, the alliance had no right to interfere in her race's matters. "Are you certain?" Queen Ai asked for confirmation. "Yes." Without an ounce of hesitation, Queen Ai manifested the same contracts, which Duchess Alina and the others had signed before their deaths. They signed it instantly. The moment they returned to their posts, all the reports of what's happening in their territories started popping in front of them akin to mushroom in the wild. In less than a second, thousands of holograms floated in the area. Duchess Alina ignored them all and focused on an invitation link to attend the Inner Circle Assembly. This is held only when major decisions have been taken by the 10 rulers. Duchess Alina knitted her eyebrows as she eyed the link, having a very, very bad feeling. Without letting emotions affect her, Duchess Alina started laying down orders. "Sebastian, I want you to oversee the evacuation of the capital and see if there is any way to save it. Alfred, I need you to oversee damage control over Constellation Galicia. Donald, you will handle the Constellation Mora. The rest focus on leading our forces to save the remaining constellations. Make sure to keep your revival on the low in the process." Duchess Alina took a deep breath and stated, "I will be joining the Inner Circle Assembly to get us as much help as possible from the Alliance." "On it." Everyone nodded with serious expressions and began their work from within the UVR. After they departed, Duchess Alina was left alone with Manananggal. "Solve this and know that surrender isn't an option." Manananggal left only one statement before putting his wisp into a dormant state to reduce the mental energy required to feed it. When he left, Duchess Alina kept eyeing the invitation link for more than 5 seconds before pressing it with a glacial expression as she envisioned Felix's face. "I can also play dirty." Back to the present. "Duchess! You're still alive? How?" Fisherman Queen Everly exclaimed, sharing her reaction out loud with everyone. Even the 2 empresses were somewhat taken aback by her appearance. Unlike Felix, the 10 rulers instantly received news from Queen Ai that confirmed Duchess Alina's death the moment her consciousness markings were severed permanently from the database. So, her appearance was nothing short of a miracle for everyone's involved here. Duchess Alina had no plans to go into details, but she still fed them with a juicy statement. "How can I die when I am the descendant of the true immortal?" Everyone was left somewhat baffled by her proclamation as they had no clue if Duchess Alina managed to survive death on her own or her ancestor was involved. "I knew everything was going to f***ing smoothly. Felix narrowed his eyes coldly at Duchess Alina. If he had to guess, he had a strong feeling that Manananggal was responsible over Duchess Alina's return. It's him. Lady Sphinx said, that little girl will never be able to revive on her own. Doesn't it mean that bastard have advanced on his ultimate ability? Thor cursed hatefully. It shouldn't be surprising. Hormungandr said, they had way more time to work on their ultimate abilities. Before anyone could ask me anything, I only want to know one thing. Duchess Alina silenced everyone and suddenly pointed her finger at Arthur and at Felix. Then, she asked coldly, why have you invited an imitator and the leader of the Void Nation? Imitator? Leader of the Void Nation? What is she talking about? Is she really pointing at Arthur? Did she suffer from brain damage? Looks that way. From the 8 rulers to the rest of the leaders, every one of them was left bewildered by her insane accusation. They could understand her feeling that Felix must have something to do with this due to his past history with the void creatures, but Arthur? No one could even process Arthur being part of the void race when he was a vital member in the Alliance for eons. F***ck, deny everything. You read my mind. Just as Arthur and Felix were about to deny her accusations and paint her as a lunatic, Duchess Alina made their attempts obsolete with a single statement. I am ready to swear an oath on all primogenitors that I am speaking the truth. Duchess Alina smiled coldly, are you daring enough to do the same? This can't be. Are those two really involved this deeply with the void race? Dear goodness! Her statement made everyone take a deep breath to calm their turmoil emotions. They understood one ironclad truth. That was if someone dared to make an oath on all primogenitors, it meant that he was 1000% certain that it wouldn't backfire on him. After all, he was involving the names of every single primogenitor, which entailed that if he got caught in his lie, only death awaited him. F***ck, she got us by the balls. Arthur's expression turned a bit ugly as he observed his allies' looks change from trust to absolute wariness. Even Felix could see that the situation was flipped on them as he was also receiving nasty glares. Still, he had no plans to go down without a fight. Are you guys for real? Felix narrowed his eyes coldly, this is the first time I attend Inner Circle Assembly and you guys show me this? Is this how you conduct your discussions and meetings? Instead of relying on evidence and hardcore facts, you use your ancestors' names in vain for any issue arising? Absolutely distasteful. I apologize Sir Felix for this unsightly parade by my peers. Arthur backed Felix the moment he hardened his emotions. I can attest that this never occurred before, and we always leave our ancestors out of such mortally matters. Although they were getting reproached, the leaders understood that they were at fault here and shouldn't have been swayed so hard by Duchess Alina's proclamation. Still, this didn't remove a single ounce of suspicion from Felix and Arthur. They are right. Queen Allura stated with a serious tone, we require evidence to support your accusations. We only lean on oaths when all solutions had been restored without solving anything. Most leaders nodded their heads in agreement and eyed Duchess Alina, hoping for at least one evidence to support her accusation. I won't lie, I don't have any evidence at the moment but the backing of my ancestor. Duchess Alina defended herself with a composed expression, after all, how could I get any evidence in such a short period of time? The war have just started, and it's too aggressive for us, forcing me to take such a dire countermeasure to avoid having the alliance fall to the manipulation of the Void Nation. Everyone was smart enough to understand that if they were put in the same scenario, they would have also done the same as Duchess Alina. How could they focus on seeking evidence when their people were being killed left and right at such an insane rapid rate? Whether you believe me or not, I can only swear on it, and you are welcome to take it as you like. Without an ounce of hesitation, Duchess Alina took the oath while giving Felix a death stare. When everyone heard it and realized that wisps of consciousness of some their ancestors didn't react in their minds, there was nothing else to be discussed. They didn't even need Felix or Arthur to swear as well, knowing that they wouldn't dare go for it if they appreciated their lives. Arthur! You traitorous F***er! I can't believe we had a disgusting member of the Void race in the leadership. How did the 10 rulers allow this to happen? Are all of you guys imitators as well? This is really an upsetting matter that needs to be investigated thoroughly. The inner circle leaders completely bashed on Arthur with the worst known curses available, feeling revolted just by the thought that a disgusting void creature being chummy with them for countless years. The fact that he led an entire race didn't make their reaction any better. Arthur, how could you? Emperor Lockle sounded more hurt by Arthur's identity reveal than everyone else. Although they were almost always at each other's throats due to their rivalry, Emperor Lockle saw Arthur as one of his few equal friends. Even the remaining rulers felt like they had been betrayed. It wasn't that unusual when they spent numerous years working together. Only the 2 empresses stayed unreactive, unbothered by the whole situation. When Arthur noticed everyone's reaction to his exposure, he couldn't help but feel slightly hurt inside. He always knew that his exposure wasn't going to be pretty, but no matter how he prepared himself, it still stung him deeply. All of you feel betrayed, but what did I do? Arthur smiled bitterly. Have I ever done anything that would harm the Alliance's benefits? Even this deal with the Void Nation is going to benefit us in the long run. Everything I did is for the sake of the Alliance's progress, just like any one of you. So, just because I am an imitator, you forget all of my accomplishments and paint me as the big bad wolf. Arthur had absolutely no issues with being seen as a traitor due to his latest actions. He could understand that. However, he really felt his heart get punched by the thought of being seen as evil just because he was an imitator and part of the Void race. Who could blame him? Before this war even occurred and messed up his life, Arthur was responsible over the rise of his race to the top 10 positions in the Alliance and maintaining it for thousands of years. God knows it was extremely difficult to achieve that when the only thing his race could provide was scrolls. Never in his life did he consider harming the interest of his race or the Alliance, as he wished to live his life at the top like everyone else. Yet, just because he was an imitator, they turned a blind eye to all of those accomplishments and hard work over the years in a split second. No matter how perfect an imitation is, I guess it will always stay just an imitation. Arthur smiled softly as he leaned against his chair while still being showered by insults and curses. No one cared about what he said to defend himself. In their eyes, nothing would ever remove the stigma of being born as a void creature. Felix had absolutely no idea how to react when he saw that almost all the hate was directed at Arthur, even though he was exposed as the leader of the Void Nation. He always knew that void creatures were alienated, but he never thought that it would be by this much. Even when he busted his ass off for a race that doesn't belong to him, an alliance that doesn't welcome him, he still didn't receive a single comment on his side. Felix shook his head with a disappointed look as he listened to everyone's barrage on Arthur. Arthur did nothing but keep his head lowered and take it in silence. I guess there is no point in keeping up a front anymore. Felix suddenly switched to an apathetic and icy expression while crossing his arms on his chest. Without an ounce of hesitation, he called out loud with a frigid tone, "If you have something to say to my councilman, address me." Upon hearing so, everyone switched their focus back to Felix. "Your councilman? I guess you really are the Void Nation's leader." Minister Aquarius frowned. "No wonder you were able to control void creatures at that time. You aren't a human in the first place. I always knew that something was weird about him." The Pandian's High Honor stated while fiddling with bracelet of beads in his hand. "Stop with such nonsense." Queen Allura defended Felix with a stern voice. "I don't know much about him being the Void Nation's leader, but no one can be serious to argue about his race. If he wasn't a human, the primogenitors would have been the first to know and stop addressing him as such." When the primogenitors were brought up, no one was able to retort against her. They knew that primogenitors might not care about their matters, but they wouldn't lie about Felix's identity just to help him out. Human or not, this isn't the focal point. Duchess Alina steered the conversation to what matters. He is the Void Nation's leader and the culprit behind this war and my assassination. The last place he should be is here. Duchess Alina was implying that Felix should be kicked out right away and have elite squads hunt him down. After all, Felix had already somewhat confessed to his identity. It's not that easy anymore. Empress Emily replied expressionlessly, Void Nation's leader or not, we have an oath between us that needs to be delivered first. Oath? What have you done? Duchess Alina's heart skipped a beat. Too bad, you were a bit late. Felix answered her while having one leg above the other, my nation has already tied the knot with the alliance, and as long as the 10 rulers want to avoid suffering from the primogenitor's wrath, they are forced to abide by those conditions. Felix displayed the conditions with a massive hologram right in front of Duchess Alina to rub it in her face. When she read the conditions and realized that the 10 rulers had already given up on them and signed a deal to replace them with the Void Nation, she felt like the world was collapsing on her. It can't be, not even 2 hours passed by and you already gave up on us. Even when Candace made the second stream and Duchess Alina saw it through Mananangle's memories, she was still under the impression that the Void Nation were in negotiation phase. That's why she rushed to this inner circle assembly, believing that the final verdict would be held after a thorough discussion with everyone. Alas! She thoroughly forgot that the 10 rulers almost never included anyone outside their elite group on such major decisions. When Felix noticed that everyone was displaying hints of guilt as they eyed Duchess Alina's devastated expression, he couldn't help but break out in mocking laughter. What are you laughing at, brat? The Fukin's Lord Aitson gave Felix a murderous stare. The bubbling hot lava visible in his protruding veins was clear indication of his fury. He wasn't the only one pissed off, as everyone felt like they had been played and yet still getting mocked for it. You know that we haven't taken that oath. Fisherman Queen Everly remarked frigidly, the 10 rulers are obliged to respect the deal because of it, but we are free to do as we please. When Duchess Alina heard so, she felt like her heart was pulled back from the abyss. She knew that the Darkin faction had lost the support of the 10 rulers since the oath applied for each race, that's why all the rulers had to take it. However, they couldn't use the oath to control the alliance inner circle since there wasn't any contract between them. In other words, the remaining inner circle members could be merely convinced and persuaded whether to join or stay out of this war. Until this point, nothing was signed or swore upon in this assembly. So, unless you tell us what did you find so funny, you can be assured that my race will be involved in this war. Fisherman Queen Everly threatened, it better be convincing. I am so sorry, but I wasn't laughing at you. Felix said as he chuckled, I was laughing at the fact that Duchess Alina dares to paint herself as the victim here when she knows damn well why this war started in the first place. What do you mean? Queen Alfreda asked with a serious tone after seeing Duchess Alina flinched for a split second. I think that everyone here believes that I have targeted the Darkin faction because I am a member of the Asgardian faction. Felix disclosed. Majority nodded their heads in agreement. The moment Felix was associated with this war, everyone here was sharp enough to assume that it was faction-related war. It made the most sense. Is that bastard going to show the recordings of our conversation with those traitors? Wendigo predicted as he watched the ongoing drama with his partners through a consciousness link from Mananangle's wisp. This is bad. Saurus frowned, if he exposed it to everyone, he will be giving them a strong reason to stay away from this war without an ounce of guilt. Bad for our descendants but good for us. Mananangle smiled cunningly, if he dares show such private conversation with the public without our permission, we will have the right to make a move on him. You're right. Saurus now wished for Felix to pull the trigger and expose them. He didn't give a shit about his descendants getting massacred as long as he was provided an opportunity to get rid of Felix once and for all. You see, I have a recording that shows my faction wasn't the main instigator of this war. Felix spoke confidently, a recording showing that I am the actual victim and all of this was just a defensive retaliation. Then, stop beating around the bush and display it. Duchess Alina provoked coldly, she was clearly ordered by her ancestor to do this. Wouldn't you like that? Felix sneered, unfortunately, the recordings show primogenitors, and I am a respectful figure who would never dare humiliate such great figures in the open. If only there is a medal to bullshit, you will be a golden medalist champion." Duchess Alina ridiculed. It looked like even the leaders didn't believe in Felix. How could they when their trust level with him was on bare bottom? "I may not showcase it, but since this assembly clearly doesn't require evidence and only honest oaths are needed, I don't see why I can't do the same." Felix smiled widely as he eyed Duchess Alina, whose expression turned green at his instant payback. Just as Felix was about to take the oath, King Arthur interrupted with a faint smile, "My king, there is no need to stoop as low as her and take such sacred oath. We the Void Nation believes in imperial evidence." What are you doing?" Felix frowned, having no clue that King Arthur would have interfered like this. An oath isn't enough to make the alliance completely cut ties with Darkin faction races. Arthur smiled. "Don't tell me. I have already done it once and made them my mortal enemies, it won't matter much to do it again." Before Felix could reply, Arthur displayed the damning recordings of his first meeting with the 3 Darkin faction primogenitors before everyone. The first sentence that Saurus made in the recording made those kings and queens have a drastic change of expression. It was none other than, "We have grown a bit bored with the balanced status of the universe, we want you to start wars and break this balance." Just this sentence alone was enough to make the alliance even consider of switching sides completely. The recording kept playing, showing to everyone that the Darkin faction's primogenitors had absolutely no issues with throwing the entire alliance in chaos for the sake of killing a single person. However, because it was said by the primogenitors, no one dared to voice their displeasure out loud. Nevertheless, they all displayed looks filled with resentment and disapproval as they eyed Duchess Alina. The guilt they felt over betraying the Darkin faction was rubbed off clean of their hearts, and what replaced it was none other than a burning grudge. When the recording was over, black lines were seen covering Duchess Alina's forehead as she gave both Felix and Arthur a murderous glare. "You have done it, you really have done it." Duchess Alina stressed coldly as she eyed Felix, "My ancestor will not forgive you for this. Why are you ogling my king?" Arthur sneered, "I went against his orders and displayed the recording on my volition. So, if they want to punish someone, I am waiting for them in the Void Realm. He dares to challenge us publicly now." Saurus cursed hatefully, "I am going to kill this F***er. Calm down." Manananggal sighed, "It's meaningless to waste our time on him when he is bound to have his main consciousness hiding in the Void Realm. With his identity already exposed, he has nothing holding him back anymore." Wendigo added. Arthur indeed stopped worrying about the Darkin faction's primogenitors when he joined the Void Nation. Now that his identity was compromised, there was nothing else to protect, as he could create a new identity and keep his main consciousness protected in the Void Realm. "You wouldn't dare do this on your own." Duchess Alina still hadn't given up on connecting Felix with the recording's exposure to buy an opportunity for her ancestor. "Alas! I can swear on it if you would like." Arthur ridiculed with a faint smirk. "You?" Duchess Alina gritted her teeth at his response, knowing that she couldn't fight back against it. The moment she used an oath instead of providing evidence to make up her case, she opened a dam, and those two didn't hesitate to take advantage of it. "Arthur, you didn't have to go this far and keep provoking those 3 bastards." Felix smiled bitterly, "There are other ways to make our case without the recording." Felix's original plan was to mention his meeting with the primogenitors after taking the oath, so those leaders would be able to get confirmation and hopefully more details from their own ancestors. All of this without exposing the recordings. "I know," Arthur admitted calmly, "but none of them would have been as affecting as the real recording." The rulers' and other leaders' resentful reaction on Duchess Alina was enough proof. Felix could only sigh and drop the subject. "I still have no clue why am I being villainized." Duchess Alina fired her last shot in the barrel, "My race has nothing to do with this. My ancestor wanted to kill the humans, not me or the other innocent vampires." Naturally, she wouldn't dare throw the blame on her ancestor without receiving his permission first. Her excuse did make some sense since the recordings didn't show anything related to the Darkin faction's races. So, the logical reaction was Felix taking this fight with the primogenitors, not to their descendants. Unfortunately, Felix had no intentions of letting her feign ignorance. Without saying much, he displayed hundreds of holograms, showing classified recordings, documents, conversations, and the list goes on and on. When the leaders dug their eyes on them, their expression couldn't help but return to icy again. You. Duchess Alina felt utter despair when she realized that those holograms were evidence that the Darkin faction's races knew about the war years ago and were preparing for it. If Arthur hadn't shown the recording beforehand, Duchess Alina could have easily defended herself that those classified fleet drills and such were to prepare for emergencies or such. Alas! Even when the holograms never brought out the universal war or the void race, everyone here was intelligent enough to connect the dots. Do you have anything else to defend for yourself? Queen Alfreda remarked nonchalantly as she eyed the silent Duchess Alina. I am done talking. Finally, Duchess Alina gave up on trying to win back the alliance to her side. I believe we have seen enough. Queen Allura interjected with a stern tone, I will file a motion to change the rule number 33, section race ranks. If you agree to allow a non-alliance member to enjoy the war spoils legally, raise your hand in favor. Felix, Arthur, Queen Allura, Fairy Matriarch, and Werewolves King were the first to raise their hands. Following them, the remaining 7 rulers raised them as well, knowing that they had no choice in this. I concur. Fisherman Queen Everly voted in favor too. Just like viewing a live avalanche, Duchess Alina watched without a single blink as her own partners and allies raised their hands one by one. None of them had an ounce of sympathy or guilt in their expression as they voted to doom her race. The voting process is over. Queen Ai announced monotonously, with 23 parties in favor, 1 party against, and 6 parties abstaining, I hereby declare that the rule has been approved for an immediate change. VRR VRR. VRR VRR. Everyone's AP bracelets started vibrating after receiving an immediate emergency notification by Queen Ai, which highlighted this rule change. This notification was sent to only the leaders of nations in the alliance. When they read it, their immediate conclusion was that the alliance had struck a deal with the Void Nation. This isn't over. We are never going to surrender or falter. Duchess Alina stared daggers in direction of Felix after accepting her fate. Good, it would have been boring if you just rolled over. Felix replied coldly. Felix might have said so, but he really hoped that those bastards would surrender as he would rather not have too many civilians' deaths on his hands, but, he knew that if she showed this, they would take advantage of his mercy. We will see who will be rolling over at the end. With this final omnibus statement, Duchess Alina resigned from the assembly. Hey brat, if you need fleets, troops, or anything to help you out, just ask. Werewolves King Tresnor requested while hitting his hairy chest, clearly in favor of how things had developed. Much appreciated, but my armies doesn't separate friends from foes. Felix clarified his rejection. I see, well, the offer still stands if you found yourself in a pickle. Werewolves King Tresnor stressed frigidly, I wouldn't mind dealing with voidlings if it meant the death of the vampire race. From everyone here, the werewolves were the only race capable of participating in this war without any legal repercussion. That's because they had an open warfare with the vampires, enabling them to fight each other at any given moment outside the Alliance's system. I will keep it in mind. Felix stood up and then said with a grateful tone while looking at everyone, Thank you all for your support and I hope we can have a great partnership when this war is over. Contact me if you have an inquiry. Boy, you better sit down. Queen Alfreda's eyelids twitched after realizing that Felix planned to escape. We have yet to discuss what we will do with your councilman as well as your true relation with the Void race. Arthur can handle himself. Felix smiled faintly, as for my relation to the Void race, well, it's none of your business. Felix waved his hand politely at Fairy Matriarch and Queen Allura before resigning from the assembly, not caring about Queen Alfreda's displeased look. He got what he came for, and he had no plans of remaining there and get interrogated. He didn't even let primogenitors do that in their council. Now that my king has left, how do you want to solve my situation? Arthur smirked coldly. Just to let you know, your previous insults have hurt me deeply, and it has affected my judgment by a considerable degree. Upon hearing so, most leaders realized that Arthur might be an imitator, but he was still the sage's king and had complete control over the scrolls market. Even with his identity being exposed, he still could cause major damages to the scrolls market and the Alliance's economy as a whole before the Alliance's squads get to him. After all, there was no explicit clause in his contract that removed his duties as the king if he was found to be an imitator. The methods to replace him was by either him giving up on his own volition or convincing the Sages' Council to replace him. Arthur, don't do anything foolish that you might regret. Minister Aqua Iris said sternly, hand over your post to the second in line peacefully and walk away. Your actions reflect the Void Nation now more than ever. Queen Alfreda stated calmly, as you can see, no one really welcomes the Void Nation to join us, don't make it any worse. Well, besides Felix's allies and the Werewolves' King, the rest really had their hands tied on the matter and were forced to choose the lesser evil. If it was really up to them, they would have kept things how it was before the war started. That's what I was planning to do before. As I have said, I always had the Alliance's best interest in heart and would never do anything to harm it. But after seeing your reaction to my identity, Arthur narrowed his eyes coldly, I have changed my mind. What are you planning to do? Seeing that everyone had their eyes on him, Arthur disclosed with a flat tone, you either keep me as the Sage's King and maintain things as it is. Or, I will make sure to sign as many non-beneficial contracts to your empires as possible before you can convince my people to replace me. Just to let you know. King Arthur smirked coldly, unlike you guys, I doubt it will be easy to convince them that their beloved king is an outsider, who meant harm to them. Everyone's expression turned for the worst after hearing his conditions. They knew that Arthur might not have enough authority to negate some serious contract with the Alliance, but he could easily make trading for scrolls a living hell. Naturally, this was going to affect the sage race much worse, but since Arthur was already going to be disposed of either ways, he didn't give a sh*t. Arthur, you are really playing with fire. Emperor Lockle warned with a solemn tone. Am I? Arthur rested a cheek on his backhand and mentioned casually, how about this? Whoever approves of me remaining as the Sage's King will get 15% discount permanently on epic and legendary scrolls purchases. 15% permanent discount? Is he for real? I must have this. The moment he said so, everyone had a slight change of expression as hints of greed started manifesting in their pupils. 15% discount might not seem like much when buying a single article, but when was it applied on a whole trade and permanent nevertheless? It was priceless. Especially when it was applied on something as expensive and important as epic/legendary scrolls. Just one legendary scroll could cost from 10 billion SC to 1 trillion SC depending on its effect. 15% discount on such single-use scrolls would save billions of coins on each scroll. Honestly, I prefer to have Arthur as the Sage's King. His true identity might have shocked me a little, but I don't really mind it that much when we will have an entire race of them joining us soon. The Spiderkin's Princess Meralia shared with a faint smile. How nice of you! Arthur's eyelids twitched after recalling that she had the nastiest curses thrown at him before. I feel the same way. Arthur has been a vital member of the Alliance's leadership, and it will be a shame to replace him with someone unworthy of a ruler's position. Shadowborn's ruler Hogan supported with a flat tone, seeming like he was reading from a script. The other leaders started shimming in their own positive opinions on the matter as well, having a 180 degrees switch. For such politicians, when given the choice of either receiving benefits or receiving penalties, they would always pick the former. Still, there were some leaders with a better moral integrity. How could you guys even approve of such matter? Emperor Lockle reproached angrily, don't you have any sympathy or respect for the sage race? How would you feel if you knew that your king isn't even from the same race as you? I might be an imitator, but I have been a sage before some of you were even born. King Arthur defended himself, plus, I am the greatest scrolls inscriptor in this generation with more than 20 legendary scrolls under my name. So, I dare you to bring a sage before me and find a single difference between us. Arthur challenged expressionlessly. Nothing you say will change the fact that you were born as a void creature and not a sage. Emperor Local retorted, not swayed in the slightest by his points. You are right. Arthur shrugged his shoulders and looked at everyone, then, he asked, if this point annoyed anyone, you are free to vote against me. When Emperor Local looked at everyone and noticed that the majority showed absolutely no signs of rejection, his expression couldn't help but turn green in disgust. How can you give them such look, my friend? Arthur tensed the term friend as he looked at Emperor Local, then, he assaulted him with numerous heart-squeezing questions. Aren't you fighting this just because your race does not require my scrolls? Isn't that crystal clear hypocrisy? Or, maybe your moral compass has finally been repaired after you threw the darkened factions to the wolves. Emperor Local's eyes kept turning frigid with each question fired at him. The worst part? He knew that he couldn't defend himself against them without turning himself into a laughingstock in front of his peers. After all, he was indeed one of the first advocates to give up on 3 alliances members when his empire's safety was threatened. Now, that his race wasn't affected negatively too much by Arthur's threats like the rest, he wanted to use his moral compass. Arthur wasn't having it, clearly, neither were the rest. That's why no one spoke in favor of Emperor Local's outburst and merely watched him without a change of expression. I am voting in favor of keeping Arthur. I have been comfortable with him for a very long time, and I am certain that the sage race will keep prospering under his rulership. Queen Allura interjected before the atmosphere could turn much worse. I am in favor as well. Empress Emily reasoned expressionlessly, the sage race will be replaced in the next Great Reset by the Void Nation as one of the 10 rulers. Hence, the Void Nation will not have 2 votes in the alliance and impact the decision-making process. In conclusion, keeping him as the leader has more benefits to the alliance than negatives. Empress Emily could barely care about the scrolls discount since the metal race never utilized scrolls, potions, or even artifacts. Yet still, she agreed to keep Arthur, which played a considerable part in pushing the majority to commit to their decision. So, one by one they voted in favor of Arthur, leaving only Emperor Local to vote against it. The rest not participating in this meeting had their votes voided. This signified that Arthur's identity was saved. Well, at least for a while. I already drafted the contract, Arthur said while forwarding everyone the contract. After reading it they found out that it merely stated the Arthur's identity must be kept a secret at all cost, and in return, the parties in favor would be getting 15% discount on epic/legendary scrolls. Anyone breaking the terms would suffer from grave punishments imposed by the alliance. Do we have any disagreement about the contract? Queen Alfreda inquired. No. All good. It's satisfactory. All the kings and queens approved of the contract besides Emperor Local. Unfortunately, the majority made decisions in the alliance, and he could only forcefully sign the contract. As for the leaders unavailable in this meeting, Queen Ai delivered the contract to them for reading even when they weren't part of the discussion. After all, no one stopped them from attending this assembly or sending someone to decide on their behalf, which meant that any decision made in their absence would take place whether they liked it or not, unless the contract was directly related to their race. In this case, the contract was related to the sages. Those bastards! How could they allow him to keep his position for a mere 15% discount bribe? Duchess Alina cursed as she read the contract amidst a meeting with the rest of the upper nobility. Having the sages in their side means that they will have an endless supply of scrolls. Marquise Sebastian frowned. Can't we expose Arthur with other methods? How can you expose him for being an imitator without having the backing of the entire alliance or ironclad evidence? Duchess Alina replied with an irritated tone, he is too popular with his own citizens and anything you accuse him of will merely be seen as an attack against their king. The only evidence available was the recording of the Inner Circle Assembly. Unfortunately, this couldn't be used since such assemblies' discussions were highly classified, making it against the rules to share it. Just as Marquis Sebastian was about to suggest another method, Duchess Alina warned, "I have just signed the contract, don't involve me in this anymore. Also, that bastard is the last concern in my mind right now." Duchess Alina narrowed her eyes in focus at a holographic screen, showing her beloved capital planet on the verge of being devoured. "Have you found any method to save it?" "I have spoken with Commander Robin Kett, and he told me that the only way to cause serious damage to the World Eater is by using our planet destroyer weapon." Marquis Sebastian shook his head. "Unfortunately, it has spawned too close to our planet. So, if we used it, our planet will perish in the process." "I see." Duchess Alina rubbed her eyelids thoughtfully. "We only have one planet destroyer weapon, and we have been keeping it hidden inside our third blood moon for emergencies. If using it is going to end up destroying the planet, I might as well keep it hidden." Duchess Alina understood that dealing with the Void Nation was extremely tricky due to their abilities to spy on everything from the Void Realm. So, if they dared to use their planet destroyer weapon, she was certain that they would get rid of it instantly no matter how much protection she provided. So, it was best to keep it hidden for another opportunity. As for Linoliv, she could only give it one last look and order Marquis Sebastian to prioritize the evacuation process. "Why don't we exit the alliance and target the human race? That F***er won't feel anything, no matter how many voidlings we kill, but, if we targeted his federation, we will have more negotiation power over him," Marquis Arthur suggested with a hateful tone. "If we exit the alliance and attack the human race, we will be considered as invaders." Duchess Alina shook her head. "Since the alliance already gave up on us, they wouldn't hesitate to take advantage of the opportunity to hasten our elimination. The Inner Circle were forced to provide reinforcement if one of their allies was being attacked by outsiders. The Void Nation used their insane pressure with their undefendable invasions to force the alliance to sit out of the war. But, the Darkin faction had no such thing, which meant they would side with the human race. Still, this doesn't mean that we can't use the human race to our advantage." Duchess Alina smiled coldly after thinking of a diabolical plan. However, since she couldn't say it or order her subordinates to pull it off without having Queen Ai snitch on her, she requested, "Ancestor, would you kindly help me with this?" Understanding what she wanted, Manananggal read her thoughts and nodded with a faint smile. "Interesting plan, I will take care of it." Duchess Alina and her subordinates were forced to not act upon the human race since they were considered as allies. However, Manananggal was outside the system. As for breaking the council rules and intervening in the war, he naturally didn't give a sh*t about adhering to them genuinely. As long as he didn't make a move personally on Felix or got caught intervening in the war, he had no issues with working in the shadows. VRR. Abruptly, Duchess Alina received a call from Jagat, the king of the gremlins. He appeared on the screen with a drained appearance like he was laboring for 30 days straight. Without delay, she accepted it and asked with a tensed tone, "You finally got online. What took you so long? What do you think?" Jagat bellowed hatefully, "I was fighting for my life against those two void monsters, who kept assaulting my mind each time I dared to exit my darkness field." He clearly was speaking about Miriam and Mammon, whose main weapons were mental attacks. "How did you escape then?" "I slowly stretched my darkness field to reach the atmosphere while I was keeping them occupied in the surface." King Jagat narrated coldly, "In an instant, I teleported through my darkness field outside the planet's atmosphere and beamed my spaceship. Then, I escaped on it." "So, you ditched your own planet and people?" Marquis Sebastian asked with a judging tone. "Yes, do you have any problem with that?" King Jagat gave him an icy gaze. "He doesn't." Duchess Alina answered for Sebastian, knowing that it wasn't time for infighting. Tisk. Marquis clicked his tongue in criticism and remained silent. He always knew that gremlins didn't have much honor and patriotism for their race and had no issues with taking selfish measures if it benefited themselves more than their race, but he didn't think that even their king wouldn't hesitate to ditch his people and planet when things got too rough for him. As an upper noble vampire, it was too graceless. Duchess Alina changed the subject by updating King Jagat about everything that happened in his absence. So, we are on our own in this. King Jagat frowned. I don't like this. I think we should seek help from outer circle races by giving out incentives. That's a good idea. Duchess Alina raised an eyebrow in surprise. She realized that only the Inner Circle Alliance members had taken the Void Nation's deal since they were the ones forced to join this war. The rest were free to act as they pleased and send as many troops as they desired. Though, because they were part of the Outer Circle, naturally their war resources weren't as great as the Inner Circle. Still, quantify could beat quality if used right. Though, if we want to make them go against the Void Nation, our incentives must push them to ignore their fear and reason. King Jagat proposed calmly, I believe only territories can move them. Putting parts of our territories for trade doesn't feel good, but if it meant getting rid of the Void Nation, I don't mind as much. Marquis Sebastian approved. In his eyes, their territories would go to the Void Nation if they lost, so they might as well hand them out for military trades. All right, Marquis Alfred sent down orders to our foreign ambassadors and tell them to get as much help as possible while giving out as little as possible. Duchess Alina ordered. On it. Marquis Alfred exited the meeting immediately. How about the Istrians? King Jagat inquired. They lost all of their authoritative leaders and have no one to take command. I can only wish them good luck. Duchess Alina narrowed her eyes coldly. I have no time to handle their problems when my race was still not in the clear. I thought the same. King Jagat approved. In their eyes, only when their war was settled could they provide help to the Istrians. So, it all depended on if they could survive until then. 5 days later. Throughout the entire universe, almost everyone was watching the same 3 live streams while holding their breaths. Those streams were showing the 3 capital planets of the Darkin faction's races from a distance. To be exact, they were showing only the visible tiny parts of those planets. What was dominate in the screen were none other than the 3 apocalyptic void abominations completely cover up those planets, resembling slimes devouring a piece of spherical candy. I am watching this with my own eyes, but I still can't believe that those historical planets will be erased from existence this easily. One of the reporters on the live stream spoke with great emotions in his voice. I don't dare imagine how vampires, gremlins, and Istrians around the universe must be feeling right now. It wasn't hard to guess. Capital planets were considered as the heart of every nation in this universe. To see them being devoured live like they were mere food must make them feel nothing but absolute anguish, like their hearts were the ones being devoured. The only silver lining from this is that the last batch of citizens have been evacuated successfully yesterday. The reporter added with a bitter smile, though, I have received news that some seniors refused to leave their homes and wanted to die in them. Everyone in the chat streams wrote F to pay respect for those stubborn geezers, who would rather die with their planet than ditch it. Don't you feel bad for them? Asna asked while chewing popcorn as she watched the same streams next to Felix on the couch. She saw that he had an indifferent expression after he heard the news. Feelings have no place in war. Felix remarked with a flat tone, they took their own choice to die with their planet and I respect that. But, it doesn't mean that I am feeling guilty of it. You are turning colder and colder. Asna smiled sadistically while giving Felix a loving look, I am proud of you. Although only 5 days have passed, Felix had indeed turned colder. It ought to happen when he kept hearing reports of the death toll each day from his councilmen. In mere 5 days, the Void Nation had taken control over more than 35% territories of the Darkin faction's races. In the process, they had destroyed well over 100,000 fleets and killed off a significant number of soldiers, reaching up to 10 million at minimum. They might be soldiers, but Felix knew that they had partners, children, friends, and families. With each death, he changed the lives of tens of people for the worst. The cherry at the top was forcing those families to escape from their planets after their armies fell under the voidlings to avoid being eaten as well. As much as Felix wanted to not admit it, he knew that many of those families ended up getting caught by the voidlings. After all, no one but Nemo could control them, which meant they do not discriminate between soldiers and civilians. So, how could Felix's heart not die slowly and turn icy? He understood that he could either kill off those emotions or let them control him and end the war. Unfortunately, ending the war without the Void Nation's victory wasn't an option anymore. "It's happening!" Asna exclaimed with an excited tone as she pointed at Linoliv. When Felix switched his focus to it, he observed the planet getting completely hidden inside the World Eater's pitch-black body. Just like Felix's stone-cold expression, there was no explosion, no noise, not even a reaction from the World Eater. Just absolute dreadful silence as the pitch-black symbiote slowly sent its tentacles towards the 3 nearby blood moons. Such a sight made everyone feel uncomfortable as it resembled a monster wanting to eat the children after finishing their mother. Duchess Alina, Marquise Sebastian, and every single vampire throughout the entire universe shared the same reaction. Tears mixed with blood sliding down their cheeks as they watched this ongoing brutal scene with bloodshot eyes. All of them knew that this image was going to be burnt down in their memories until the day they die. "I will make you feel the same pain, I swear on my soul I will make you feel the same pain." Duchess Alina kept repeating under her breath like some sort of mantra as she envisioned Felix's face next to the stream. She knew that the planet's death was going to affect her badly, but she never thought it would be by this much. This made her channel all of her grief and torment, then turn it into hatred pointed at no one but Felix. It had created enough hatred that would last for eternity. In less than 30 seconds, the other 2 planets had suffered from the same fate as Linoliv, causing the gremlins and Astrians to accompany the vampires in the anguish train. Though, it was much worse for the Astrians since their planet was devoured by a dreamer. This made them watch their planet join thousands of other cosmic entities inside the pinkish translucent dreamer's skin, and then get taken inside the void realm. It was like a daylight kidnapping happening right in front of their eyes, and they could do nothing but weep and scream. "Our wishes and prayers goes to our brothers and sisters." The reporter sighed, "No one deserves to go through this situation in his life. I really hope that the Void Nation won't do the same with the other planets." "Turn it off, we have watched enough." Duchess Alina ordered frigidly, "Tell me the updates." Marquise Alfred stood up and disclosed, "I have convinced dragonlings, goblins, gnomes, catfolk, sylphs, and kobolds to join our cause. The rest have either completely rejected me or told me they will think about it. That's it." Duchess Alina frowned in displeasure. Were our ambassadors stingy with their traits or are they just too scared of the Void Nation? "It's the latter." Marquise Alfred added with a peculiar voice, "But, I was told by the ambassadors that those leaders were open to the idea of trading military support with territories at the start. However, they all changed their minds after they discussed things with their advisors. It wouldn't have been weird if not all of them reacted in the same manner." When she heard this, Duchess Alina's expression turned for the worst instantly after guessing what truly happened. Those advisors were either controlled by the Void Nation in the shadows or they were taking their identities like that bastard Arthur. She was absolutely right in his guess. The moment Duchess Alina sent ambassadors to discuss with the leaders of those races, Felix had received the news from his spies planted there. Since many of his void succubi, jinns, and imitators had already established high-leveled identities and authority within most alliances' races, it wasn't hard to use their influence in their favor. "God damn it, they have reach everywhere." Marquise Sebastian slammed the table angrily, knowing that they couldn't even expose those moles without upsetting those backgrounds. After all, they had no evidence to support their claims. "Let's not allow this get into us." Duchess Alina asked, "How many fleets did we get from the others?" "In total, well over 20,000 warships with a modest model and almost 20 mother battalions." It should be enough to reinforce our troops for a while. Duchess Alina sighed, not too pleased with the numbers. If they had backup from the alliance, this war would have gone in a drastically different direction, since just the metal race alone could provide them with fleets 100 times more dangerous than even those voidlings. Alas, she could only suck it up and find another way to win this war. I know that you are placing your hopes on that plan, but have you considered my suggestion? Jagat interjected. I still don't think it's going to work. Duchess Alina shook her head. If I was in place of that bastard, I will never give up on such massive advantage just to end the war a bit early. That's where you are mistaken. King Jagat stated calmly, you compare yourself with him, but you keep forgetting that he is still a kid, who barely experienced 40 years in life. For his first ever racial war to be leading it and be responsible over the death of everyone in it must be an extremely heavily toll on his mind and heart. King Jagat reasoned, so, if we were to give him a way out of this war without making him kill more people, I am fairly certain he will take it, even if it meant giving up on such a massive advantage. When she heard so, Duchess Alina's opinion on the matter couldn't help but start to align with Jagat's reasoning. He's right, that bastard also showed many merciful acts in this war to avoid unnecessary slaughter. Duchess Alina narrowed her eyes. It's clear that he is doing this against his own will. So, he will grasp into anything that we offer him to end this war with his victory without more deaths. His mercy is his weakness. I will be a fool not to take advantage of it. So, what do you think? Should we make the public statement now? King Jagat inquired after seeing her change of expression. Not yet. Duchess Alina smiled coldly, let's drag the war for a month at least, with more deaths in our side, the harder he will bite. Marquis Sebastian and Alfred couldn't help but feel chills course on their spine at Duchess Alina's diabolical suggestion. She had no issues with sacrificing millions more of vampires, Astrians, and gremlins for the sake of making this plan work. King Jagat couldn't be more right about Felix's assessment. He might be extremely intelligent and cunning, but when it came to making such merciless decisions, he could never amount to Duchess Alina. Speaking about Felix, he could be seen sitting in the throne hall inside Nemo's consciousness with the rest of the councilmen and Candace. How is our preparation to intercept their reinforcement? Felix inquired. 6 combat squads are waiting patiently near their interception point. Candace answered. Have you asked our moles about the duration of the journey for the reinforcement? Yes, they told me it will take 10 to 15 days max for each fleet. Good. Tell our squads to gain control over their fleets without much destruction. Felix ordered with a flat tone, our voidlings are destroying every single spaceship of our enemies. It's reducing our spoils of war by a lot. If there was one thing that Felix disliked about the void armies, it would definitely be their inability to listen to orders and just eat anything in their paths. In the past 5 days, all the battles they went through, his voidlings emerged either victorious or sent eradicated. Whatever it was, the space and even surface battlefields were filled with nothing but metal debris. When each warship and mother battalion cost tens of billions to even trillions, it didn't feel good in the slightest. On it. After finishing with the meeting, Felix switched his focus to the copy in his house that was sitting with Isna on the couch. How did it go? She asked casually. We are still winning, and by a landslide. Felix replied without an ounce of happiness in his tone. Isna honestly started to feel slightly worried about Felix after seeing his reaction. I see. She had no issues with him getting colder, but if the weight of death started affecting his mind, it would be really too distressing for his future. To make matters worse, Felix's identity as the Void Nation's king was leaked from many creditable sources in the past 5 days. If the leaders weren't enforced to keep everything discussed in the assembly a secret, the news would have taken off much faster. Still, just those leaks were enough to paint Felix as a villain in the network by many keyboard warriors. As much as Felix couldn't care less about other people's opinions, the fact that most victims affected by this war kept trying to slam his good conscience couldn't be ignored, no matter how much he tried. The more he buries his emotions and seals them with an icy cage, the harder he will get affected when the seal breaks. Thor frowned, I don't like this at all. Me neither. Jormungandr sighed, he wasn't ready to have this many innocent lives put on his conscience at once. Unlike Felix, every tenant in his mind were completely accustomed to random deaths happening because of them. In fact, even taking innocent lives had no effect on them as long as they believed that their deaths didn't go to waste. For example, Lady Sphinx had no problems with doing experiments on innocent subjects for the sake of knowledge and truth. It was wrong in the eyes of others, but not in hers. In the same breath, she wouldn't kill anyone without any good reason. This made it quite straightforward to not feel any sort of guilt when she finished with those experiments. In the case of Felix, even though the war was a necessity, and he knew deep down that if he backed out, the lives of his own people would be endangered, it still didn't relieve the guilt of innocent lives taken because of him. No matter how much he hangs around with you, he is still a human. Elder Kraken shared a bit of his wisdom. Humans' emotions are the hardest to control, this what makes them unique from each other. Almost every other race were born with specific emotions that define their personalities and lives. Dragons were known for being proud, overbearing, vengeful, selfish, and wrathful. Although they also possessed other emotions and desires, the mentioned above remains dominate in almost all of them. In the same breath, elves were known for being extremely loyal, obsessive, kind, gentle, and attuned with nature. They might act in different ways depending on the situation, but all of them behaved from birth under those mentioned prerogative. Meanwhile, humans were born like a slate sheet without a single emotion being dominate over the other. The environment and growth phase shape each human differently, making them able to have insane pride similar to dragons, greed similar to goblins, and ruthlessness similar to beasts. Right now, Felix was losing control over his emotions because of his guilty conscience beginning to dominate everything about him due to this new environment. The only solution he found was ignoring it and burying it deep in his heart, having no clue how to move forward otherwise. Let's just hope this doesn't scar him for life and overcome it to become a better version of himself. Carbuncle smiled wryly as he blew smoke rings, knowing exactly how it felt to have guilt control his entire life. Can't we do anything to help him? Asna asked with a worried tone, fearing that Felix might change forever because of this. Unfortunately, he has to find his own way to handle it, so he can truly move forward. Elder Kraken shared, otherwise, he will be dependent on whoever helped him forever. Upon hearing so, Asna could only hold Felix's hand tightly and watch him analyze the holographic reports in front of him without an ounce of emotion on his face. Those reports really didn't help when some of them were live recordings of Voidlings' armies razing down cities packed with soldiers and some unfortunate citizens too slow to escape in time. Send extra void creatures to Dystopia planet, the resistance is too tough in there. Give up on Azuna planet, the nearest reinforcement will take a week to arrive. Prioritize taking down Astrian's territories. We must take advantage of their leaderless situation to force out as many surrenders as possible from their isolated planets. Felix kept giving out orders continuously while his deadpan eyes danced from one hologram to another. Although there were hundreds of holograms, each showing a separate invasion, he was still able to give out the best possible order. We have successfully conquered the third most important planet in the Astrians' territory. Do I give the order to move out and assist the nearest squad? Candace inquired. Felix expanded the live stream for the mentioned planet and noticed that two void succubi were standing in front of a kneeling Astrian male, whose body was covered in bloody wounds, yet, he didn't seem to mind as his face had a wide pervy delighted grin on it. It seemed like he was out of it. His eyes were out of focus and cloudy. Good job, tell them to go provide backup. Felix ordered. All right. Candace delivered his orders instantly, causing those two bewitching succubi to command their squads to gather the Voidlings' army and retreat. Felix had no worries about this planet falling again in the hands of the Astrians when its governor had fallen under those void succubi and became their sex slave. With both of them attacking his mind, it took merely a few days to break him apart instead of years of effort if they were alone. Now that he was on their side, and he became the sole responsible over his planets, he was given the right to surrender by Queen Ai and relieve those poor soldiers from the war. Unfortunately, this could happen only with the Astrians since they had lost all of their authoritative figures. Planets' governors of the other two races could only fight until death even if it was a losing battle, unless Duchess Alina and King Jagat gave them the order to surrender. Obviously, this wasn't happening anytime soon. Days went by and then weeks. Before long, an entire month was concluded since the moment the war had started. So much was packed in this month alone as the entire network was left buzzing each day with new information about the war's development. Starting with the Void Nation intercepting the reinforcement fleets sent by Outer Circle races to help the Dark Factions races blight. The news had taken everyone by storm since well over 20,000 warships were stolen by mere 60 Void citizens. This wasn't all, as the Void Nation had come out with a statement that threatened any background from interfering in the war anymore, promising that they would switch their target into them next. This was enough to cause those Outer Circle races to completely give up on the thought of stepping foot in this war, even when the Darken faction kept increasing the size of territories up for trade. As for the Alliance Inner Circle, they respected the terms of the deal and stayed out of this war regardless of how many pleading letters sent to them by the Darken faction's citizens. With both the Inner and Outer Circles washing their hands from this war, it kept progressing in a linear path without a single twist. That path was nothing but absolute destruction of the Darken faction without an ounce of resistance. The sides were so unevenly matched, the Astrian race territories ended up getting 99% conquered in less than 2 weeks. This forced the Astrians to either seek refuge in nearby galaxies or deserted planets inside their territories. Whatever they did, the Astrians' empire was considered as erased from existence, and only those spread out citizens throughout the universe were what remained of it. All of this happened in mere 2 weeks, which was a record on its own. Every racial war happening either in the Dark Ages era or this era always took decades if not centuries to conclude. With the Astrians' empire fall, everyone predicted that the vampires and gremlins would voice their surrender to avoid any unnecessary slaughter. After all, the Void Nation showed to everyone that they never carried on a single invasion after a surrender was voiced. Alas, day after day went by, and millions upon millions of deaths occurred on each of them. Yet, not a single governor of the invaded planets announced their surrender. It was so bad, some planets ended up having everyone slaughtered to the last man because the leaders refused to stop the war. This backfired on no one but the vampires and gremlins leaders, as everyone on the network blamed them for any additional unnecessary death. After all, as leaders, they were responsible over the safety of their people, and if they couldn't protect them, they must admit defeat to save the rest at least. That was just common sense in any war. Sadly, Duchess Alina and King Jagat turned deaf ears to the pleas of their own people and others in the network. "I think it's time to voice our challenge," King Jagat proposed calmly as he sat with Duchess Alina. "You read my mind." Duchess Alina smiled coldly. "We have already shown our conviction to die than surrender, so unless he has no issues with committing complete genocides on each planet, he has to accept it. You handle it." Without an ounce of hesitation, Duchess Alina started a live stream and used her connection to spread it far and wide throughout the entire universe. In less than 2 minutes, hundreds trillions of viewers jammed up the stream services. Is she finally going to announce her surrender? Asna expressed with a relieved tone as she watched the stream with Felix. The majority of the viewers tuned in with hopeful thoughts, wanting nothing more than to hear those magic words from Duchess Alina's lips to end this nightmare for everyone. It might have lasted for a mere month, but the videos and clips of the war in the network were too nightmarish due to the Voidlings' involvement. "Who knows?" Felix replied with a faint rough voice, like he was trying to talk through a bad case of flu. His pale complexion and overall deathly zombie-like appearance didn't make it look any better. "Felix." Asna smiled bitterly as she glanced at her man. Gone was Felix who used to laugh and joke around. Gone was Felix who used to smirk confidently, regardless of what situation he was put into. Gone was Felix, who was always emitting an air of shameless and cunningness around him. If his grandfather and his friends saw him right now, they would honestly mistake him for a walking corpse. This month might have been heavy on everyone, but no one could even come close to what it was doing to Felix's mental health and Seven Hearts. Foremost, I would like to apologize to my own people for entrusting me with your protection and failing to deliver. The moment Duchess Alina saw that enough viewers joined the stream, she immediately bowed her head with a sorrowful expression. Everyone in the chat took a moment to process her sudden apology and then rained on her with all types of curses and insults. It came mostly from her own people, as none of them trusted in her leadership capabilities anymore. When she was proclaimed to be dead, all of them felt at loss and wished for her presence to return, so she could lead them out of this mess. She did return and restored hope in their hearts. Alas, nothing changed with her revival and actually just made things much worse for those innocent civilians. When the vampires saw that the majority of the Istrians had survived the war and sought refuge in other nations, every one of them wished that she would have remained dead, so their governors wouldn't continue fighting losing battles and surrender like the Istrians. Naturally, this didn't mean that Felix or the Void Nation weren't hated anymore. All of them were still treated like the devils and prayed for their death by every vampire and gremlin. Their hate wasn't going to subdue even when centuries go by. When Duchess Alina read some of those nasty comments, she showed a bitter smile and said, "I deserve everything you throw at me. I have failed you, I have failed my ancestor, and I have failed my own race." If she is fishing for sympathy, it ain't working out. Asna giggled in amusement after seeing that the comment section was still as negative as ever. Felix gave a slight nonchalant head nod and continued watching the stream. Asna could only sigh in defeat and stop trying to lighten Felix's mood for now. God knows how much she tried on daily basis to be supportive of Felix and uplift whenever something horrible happened in the war. Yet, nothing worked. Still, Asna had no plans of leaving Felix on his own or stopping her attempts to cheer him up. "I am firm believer that surrendering won't accomplish anything and merely cause our race to end up homeless in the universe and targeted by everyone until we end up going extinct." Duchess Alina took a deep breath and said, "However, I realized that we will end up going extinct either ways if the war continued on this progression. Since we already lost most of our fleets and no one in the alliance is helping us, I have decided to take matters on my own hands and end this once and for all." Before anyone could interpret her statement, Duchess Alina narrowed her eyes in focus and announced out loud, "As the vampire's 10th Duchess, I hereby declare that I am open to a fair death match with the Void Nation's king, and whoever won will be forced to raise the white flag for their nation." This news caught all the viewers by surprise, making them spam exclamation marks on the chat rooms. "She dares!" Asna gave a murderous glare at Duchess Alina, feeling her killing urges return. Who could blame her? She noticed Felix's corpse-like expression drastically change for the first time in the past month, finally moving some of his numbed facial muscles. From his expression alone, it was easy to recognize that he was more than open for the challenge. "I can end this war with my own hands, I just need to win the challenge and all of this will be over." Felix mewed with a bit of light restored into darkened pupils. "It will be finally over." "Felix, it's danger." "Asna, just don't." Thor shook his head after seeing that Asna was attempting to change his mind. "But, it's too dangerous and unnecessary." Asna bit her lips. "That B*TCH isn't easy to handle, and if they fought in an arena, Felix will struggle to defeat her even with his upgrades." Asna was always confident in Felix's capabilities, but in this case? She knew that this fight wasn't a joking matter. Duchess Alina was ranked as 12 in the Empyrean rank, only below Fisherman Queen and the top 10 Supremes. This meant that she was considered stronger than the Werewolves King, the Pandian's High Honor, the Spider-Kin's Princess, and the rest of the Inner Circle leaders. She hadn't climbed to such rank by mere luck. Asna understood that Felix wasn't going to kill her as easily as the last time when he would be facing her at her peak form and in a battle-ready stance. It doesn't matter if it's going to be dangerous or irrational to take the challenge. Elder Kraken spoke gently, your boyfriend has to accept it regardless of what. Otherwise, his conscience will finally break apart. Kraken is right. Lady Sphinx supported with a solemn tone. The only reason Felix is still hanging on to his sanity is because he firmly believes that he can't do anything to stop this on his own while still making sure his nation wins. But now, an opportunity has presented itself to make all wrongs right, and if he rejected it because it's irrational or stupid, he will have no excuse to tell his guilty conscience anymore. Lady Sphinx sighed. If that happens, Felix won't be himself anymore ever again. In other words, Felix's personality would be forced to drastically change to this cold, calculative, and rational robot forever. After all, only detached robots would ignore this challenge and prefer to conclude the war after slaughtering everyone. But, this isn't fair, it's not fair. Asna's eyes turned a bit red as she stared at Felix's hopeful eyes. She knew that he went through too much in the past month until he reached his breaking point. Now, she was told that everything could have been avoided with a mere challenge? She couldn't accept it. In her opinion, Felix should finish what he started instead of risking his life and wasting his nation's effort on a single challenge. Alas, Felix wasn't born with a god's complexity like her, making him able to detach himself from the death of those mere mortals. Felix refused to throw away his humanity to become one. I have made my case and I wish that the Void Nation's king will join the stream and give me his answer. Duchess Alina requested calmly, I will be waiting for 10 minutes. She is quite delusional to think that our king will accept her challenge. Who's dumb enough to throw away a certain victory for nothing? I know, right? The Void citizens conversed with each other on this situation within Nemo's consciousness. They were laughing and joking around, knowing deep down that Felix wouldn't do this to them. Unfortunately, they saw through this situation with the eyes of void creatures born out of evil, having absolutely no issues with even causing the entire alliance to go extinct. Felix might be their king, but he wasn't a void creature like them. So, in less than 10 seconds, Felix joined the stream with Duchess Alina, stunning all the viewers, who were still prepared to enter a heated debate whether Felix would join the stream or not. Without a greeting or waiting for anyone to react, Felix asked one question with a piercing cold eyes directed at Duchess Alina, why now? Duchess Alina went silent for a few moments before asking back, what do you mean? You know what I mean. Everyone watching the stream knows what I mean. Felix stressed, why are you proposing a challenge now instead of doing so at the start of the war or even in the middle? Why now? Based on discussions in the chat rooms, everyone wanted to know Duchess Alina's reasoning as well. In their eyes, the war went to sh*t for the vampires from the very start, and it was clear that no matter how much they struggled, they weren't going to win it. If so, why not propose this salvation challenge much earlier? Whether it worked or not, at least countless lives would have a bit of hope of being saved. I had to test out other options before resorting to this. Duchess Alina answered composedly, it's the last countermeasure since I don't know whether you are going to accept it or not. She somehow deflected the bullet with a logical response. Still, Felix wasn't planning on dropping this subject at all. I was going to accept it even if you proposed the challenge at the start of the war. Felix replied coldly, I merely sought the destruction of your empire, and if it meant achieving it with a simple death match without a continuing war, I would have taken it in a heartbeat. He is joking, right? I don't think he is. The hell is going on? Upon hearing so, everyone realized that Felix had no issues with accepting the challenge even when it meant battling the 12-ranked strongest individual in the alliance, which was truthfully insane. This had taken the Void Nation's citizens by surprise more than everyone else. You're lying to fish for sympathy. Duchess Alina retorted, if you truly didn't want to start the war, you wouldn't have tried to assassinate all the leaders at the very beginning, you would have challenged us to a fair battle instead of attempting to start chaos. I never said I didn't want to start the war. I said I wanted to avoid continuing it if there were other options to fulfill my goal. Felix sneered, that's why I tried to assassinate the leaders at the start. I hoped to conclude the war with the least numbers of casualties. If you all died, the vampires and gremlins, civilians and even soldiers wouldn't have had to suffer for additional 2 weeks, unlike the Istrians. As for proposing the challenge at the start? Are you dumb? I am the winning side. Felix addressed. It's not my responsibility to seek solutions for your own failures to protect your own kind. Duchess Alina went silent at his arguments, not knowing how to get herself out of this without appearing like she was making excuses. Felix might have had his personality twisted, but it didn't mean that he had lost his edge or wits. He is right, it's foolish to blame the wolves for the death of the sheep if the shepherd walked them near their den. Meanwhile, the viewers agreed wholeheartedly with Felix's last statement. Even the ones who despised him the most, understood that Felix had his duties to his people and Duchess Alina had her duties to her people. To attempt and blame her own failure to protect her race on Felix was quite embarrassing for a leader, especially when she started the stream by owning this failure when clearly, she was merely fronting to keep her people backing her up. When Felix saw that Duchess Alina wasn't planning to continue on this subject, he lost his mood to keep conversing with this ruthless monster. In his eyes, he might be a monster too with everything that had happened in the past month, but at least if he was put in the same situation as her, he would have sought to fight for his people even if it meant doing it personally. I repeat, I agree to your challenge. Felix stated with a flat tone, if you win, my Void Nation will leave both races alone and return all conquered territories. If I win, both gremlins and vampire must immigrate to somewhere else. In addition, none of you can start an official empire ever again. Firstly, I am speaking merely for my own race. Whether I win or lose, it has nothing to do with gremlins. Duchess Alina stated calmly, so, you need to fight King Jagat as well if you want to conclude the war on his race too. This news pissed off the Void citizens and Felix's supporters since it was a clear unfair demand. It would be already extremely difficult to deal with just one of them, now he had to fight both? Secondly, I am not too fond of your second condition. You have no right to cut off rebuilding our legacy away from us. Duchess Alina remarked with a stern tone. This didn't cause as much of a reaction since they understood that Felix's condition was indeed too harsh. After all, being banned from founding a new empire implied that their race would merely end up with having many kingdoms at best. In the alliance, many benefits and important options were based whether a background was a nation, kingdom, or an empire. Nations was a term coined on backgrounds that control only one solar system. If they expanded their civilizations into another solar system, they get promoted to an official kingdom by the alliance. For a kingdom to become an empire, they were required to control well over 1,000 solar system minimum. All of them needed to have at least one planet populated. Hence, if the vampires were defeated, even if they started in a new galaxy and completely took control over it by spreading their civilizations, they would merely be proclaimed as one giant kingdom. Even if they named themselves to be an empire, the alliance wouldn't acknowledge it and allow them to receive the benefits of being one. Since federations and such were considered as empires in terms of statute in the alliance, they would never be able to go past such heavy limitation. This would make their race be considered on the bottom of the alliance for eternity. Firstly, I know that King Jagat is listening to this. So, if he is interested in being part of this deal, he will have to fight a councilman of my choosing. I am not fighting two of you even if I could wipe the floor with your corpses. Secondly, tough luck, I don't care whether you are fond of my conditions or not. Felix spoke in an indifferent manner, if you want this challenge to occur, you will accept them. If not, I am perfectly fine with continuing this war as it is. All I know is that the next victims of the war will definitely not be on my conscience. Felix pointed at Duchess Alina and stressed coldly, it will be on you and only you. Without waiting for her response, Felix exited the live stream. He closed his eyes and massaged his eyelids silently while having millions of thoughts and questions running through his head. Did I make the right decision? What would the Void citizens think of me now? Should I have been less assertive on the conditions? What if they cancelled the challenge and wanted to take this to the end? I said that the next fatalities wouldn't be on my conscience, but I am still reluctant to keep this massacre ongoing. What am I supposed to do? Just as Felix's mind was being flooded with doubts, hesitation, and uncertainty about the future, Asna reached out to his hands and put them away from his eyelids without saying anything. When Felix tried to speak, she shushed him with a finger and helped put his head gently on her lap. Then, she started to massage his temples gently while looking him directly in the eyes with a loving look. Felix, no matter what happens, I will always be by your side. Asna whispered, so, stop doubting your decisions and act on what your hearts tell you regardless of how wrong it seems. But, it's really hard. Felix smiled bitterly. Your entire life was packed with difficulties. Asna smiled beautifully, this is merely one of them. I firmly believe that your previous difficulties have helped shape and prepare you to overcome this roadblock. You think so? I don't think. I am confident that you are up for the challenge, whether it's fighting that SL*T or concluding the war in a normal manner. Asna reached out to his forehead and gave him a soft kiss before murmuring, so, don't doubt yourself and finish this war with your head held up. The moment she said so, Duchess Alina declared coldly in the stream, we agree to your conditions. After 24 hours we will be holding 2 open death matches in the UVR with Queen Ai as the host. We will sign the contracts under everyone's eyes to make sure that both parties will be held accountable by the public. If you agree to those conditions, come back and make a statement. Felix glanced at Duchess Alina and the chat rooms that went absolutely wild at such insane news. Then, he turned to face Asna and smiled for the first time in this month, making Asna's eyes tear up a bit. Welcome back. Felix wiped her tears with his thumb gently and leaned closer to her lips. Then, he whispered with a tint of emotion in his voice, I love you. Before Asna could react, Felix held her head with one hand and kissed her softly, making her forget anything she was going to say and focus purely on engaging in their passionate kiss. As for his other hand, Felix used it to write a single sentence in the chat room. It's on. While Felix was recovering his mental health by being intimate with Asna, the Darkin faction's primogenitors had grouped up with King Jagat and Duchess Alina to discuss the upcoming 2 battles. This is your last opportunity to redeem yourselves. Wendigo stated with an icy tone as he gazed at Duchess Alina and King Jagat. We are up to the task, my lord. Duchess Alina smiled coldly, I have chosen deathmatch in the UVR to make sure that nothing will save that punk when I get my hands on him. Although Felix had killed her before, Duchess Alina wasn't afraid of him in the slightest. In her eyes, that ambush only succeeded because of many boxes being ticked off simultaneously. In this battle, not a single box was going to be ticked off. You still need to be careful and don't underestimate him. Saurus warned, we underestimated him in every game, and he always came on top somehow. So, you better take this as seriously as possible, like you will be facing Elder Dragon. I understand. Duchess Alina could see that the ancestors really placed all of their hopes on this upcoming death match to kill Felix. After all, she was the strongest of their descendants alive, which meant if Felix defeated her, it was over for them in the games forever. As for their races losing the war and being forced off to never start an empire, they couldn't care less. Jagat, you also need to be careful. Wendigo frowned, I actually fear for your battle more than Alina's. I know that upper figures of Void Race are immensely powerful, I have tested it beforehand. King Jagat nodded with a solemn expression while recalling his battle with Mammon and Miriam. You are mistaken. Mananangel shook his head, you should wish to fight those 2 than deal with that monster. Monster. King Jagat was taken back at the notion that even primogenitors could name someone below them as a monster. I am certain that Punk will choose him to fight you. Saurus narrowed his eyes, we never bothered to learn much about him in the old days, but his actions were too rampant, it was hard to ignore his existence. Are you referring to the Ruiner? King Jagat asked rhetorically, already knowing that it was him. All I can advise you is to prepare nothing but uplifting your pride. Wendigo said, your battle will be decided in the first second because of it. Don't say much, you will just put doubts in his mind and end up making him dread his opponent before meeting him. This will affect his pride much worse. Manananggal said. True. Let's hope at least he puts a decent fight. The primogenitors switched the subject forcefully, not caring about King Jagat's questions. In their minds, they already proclaimed that King Jagat as a walking man. It would take him a miracle to win his boot, and they would rather not take away even that slight chance of victory by telling him stories about the ruiner. This was how desperate the Darkin faction were to kill off Felix. They knew that they would be sending King Jagat to a certain death and make gremlins around the universe homeless, yet, they considered it worth it if it would result in Felix's death. King Jagat had no idea about this and had a strong belief that he would win his battle. After all, he was also ranked in the top 20 strongest players in the platform. What about your first plan? You even moved your own old bones to handle it personally. Soros asked as he eyed Manananggal. Because of those circumstances, I decided to change it a little. Manananggal smiled faintly. What do you have in mind? You will see when the time comes. Duchess Alina showed a glacial smile after hearing so, knowing exactly what her ancestor intended to do. She was all for it. Whether I win or lose, you will feel the same pain as I. Duchess Alina laughed sadistically in her mind as she envisioned Felix's face. On the other side of the coin, Felix could be seen holding a closed-off meeting with only his councilman and spokesperson. As for the rest of the Void Nation citizens, Felix neither apologized nor explained his reason to accept the challenge. In his heart, he had taken the best decision, and if they wanted to judge him for it, then they could do it, but, as their leader, he would not apologize for it. The Ruiner, if you need anything to handle your opponent, just name it. Felix stressed. Felix was forwarded the fight's rules after he accepted the challenge. Based on the rules, everything was allowed except for divine equipment and technological weaponry. This meant there was no limit to number of legendary scrolls, potions, or artifacts used in this death match. Me need anything. The Ruiner sneered, maybe a stretcher to pick up that weakling's corpse after I'm done with him. As long as you are confident. Felix didn't pester him anymore, knowing that the Ruiner hated anything that doubted his strength. So, he exited the meeting after spending a few more minutes explaining how things would go in the battles. The moment he switched his focus to his copy in his UVR's house, he noticed that he had missed some calls from his grandfather and his friends. Are you going to ignore them again? Asna asked as she glanced at his bracelet's screen. I. Felix exhaled a deep breath and closed his calls inbox, not planning to return anyone's calls, especially for his grandfather. He felt too ashamed to face his grandfather since the moment his identity was exposed as the Void Nation's leader. Maybe give him a chance. Asna advised, I know that your grandpa always wants best for you and will never judge you for this war even if he knew nothing about it. That's why I am ashamed to talk to him. Felix smiled wryly, I know that my grandpa must disapprove of my actions, yet still, he will have my back and support me. Who knows, he might be calling you just to check on you before your fight. Asna reasoned, in his eyes, this might be the last chance he will see you. Felix knew that she was speaking the truth, but Felix still felt too disgusted and uncomfortable by the thought of speaking to his grandfather after being responsible over taking tens of millions of lives. I will talk to him after the war and explain to him everything, he deserves to know the entire truth. In the end, Felix had taken decision to contact his grandfather only when he was ready to bring him to his own world. After all, nothing could explain this war except for the truth. Felix refused to keep lying and hiding things from his grandfather. Right now, he had only one thing to focus on, preparing to defeat Duchess Alina in 24 hours. Back on Earth, a tiny beautiful greenish island could be seen in the middle of nowhere on the Pacific Ocean. This was Sky Pearl Island. It might be small and peaceful, but it was considered as the most dangerous place in the entire Milky Way. That's because it was the home of the Maxwell family and where Felix's grandfather resided most of the time. Although everyone knew this information, no one dared to use Felix's grandfather or his family as ways to threaten him. Who would dare do so when the Federation turned this island into an indestructible fortress with the most expensive defensive measures? Unbeknownst to everyone, there were a few Void citizens living here and keep a watch from the Void realm. Felix planted them there to help his grandfather escape through the Void realm if something were to happen. Inside Felix's hotel, Grandpa Robert was seen sighing in disappointment after realizing that his calls weren't getting through to his grandson. Failed again? Eric inquired while playing a shooting game on a hologram. That brat is hellbent on snubbing me. Grandfather Robert's eyelids twitched in annoyance. Boss must be really busy with his upcoming battle. Eric showed an optimistic foolish smile and assured, I am certain he will talk to you after the war is finished. Grandfather Robert knew that was merely part of the truth and that Felix was avoiding him out of shame. After all, he was the one raising him and knew everything about his character. He hoped to reach out to him and be there for him, knowing that whatever he was going through must be extremely difficult. I just hope that he has a shoulder to lean on. Grandfather Robert sighed, knowing that his grandsons had changed drastically after seeing his appearance in the latest stream. He truly feared that he would end losing himself even if he won his war. I might as well leave him an email. Since he wasn't going to talk to him, Grandfather Robert believed that it was best to leave what he wanted to tell him in a letter. Maybe if Felix read it, he wouldn't be too ashamed and reach out on his own. After he spent a short while drafting the email, Grandfather Robert sent it and closed his inbox, knowing that Felix wasn't going to respond to him anytime soon. Then, he glanced at the sunset on the window and murmured softly, "Good luck, son, I am always rooting for you, no matter what you do." While Felix, Duchess Alina, and King Jagat were doing everything they could to prepare for the battles, the network was buzzing non-stop with news about them. Those two battles had attracted so much attention, the SG committee had decided to postpone important games which were conflicting with the battle's date. They knew that hundreds trillions of viewers would be stolen from them. Since those two battles were streamed free of charge, no one was going to miss them even if it meant skipping on their idols' games. Naturally, gambling dens couldn't waste such a fine opportunity to finesse money out of the public as they had set up many unique bets for everyone to take part in. Because Felix had proved himself to be a force to reckon with, even though he was going against the 12-ranked Empyrean player while he was merely at 200 rank average, the odds were close to even in his fight. On other hand, the Ruiner didn't receive much love and had 1 to 5 odds against him. After all, no one knew anything about him while King Jagat's achievements and prowess was spread far and wide. In this heated atmosphere in the network with bets flying all over the place and excited tweets of celebrities going viral, the time of the battles had finally arrived. "Are you ready to be teleported to the arena?" Queen AI asked Felix monotonously. "Yes." Felix nodded with a serious expression. The moment she received his confirmation, Queen AI teleported Felix towards a randomized virtual planet. King Jagat and Duchess Alina were already there waiting for him next to a simple cafe table with 3 chairs. Nothing wrong would have been with the scene if the table wasn't in the center of a green field, stretching for as far as the eye could perceive. If one could zoom out a bit further from above, he would spot humongous mountainous chains with breathtaking waterfalls and forests on their majestic bodies. Those mountainous chains were circling the green field and locking it down, making the entire scenery resemble an arena born out of nature. Landlord! 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 Felix was forced to ignore the view and lift his head after his name began chanting thunderously in the sky. The sight he saw was enough to overwhelm anyone as the entire sky was filled with stacked-up holographic chairs reaching to the exosphere. Without needing to count, Felix discerned that hundreds of trillions of spectators decided to watch the battles live. There would have been actually much more if the space wasn't filled up, forcing the rest of viewers to switch to watch the stream in the comfort of their homes or social areas. Still, all of Felix's friends and closed ones managed to attend due to being prioritized by Queen AI. Although Felix's name was echoing through the arena, causing even the grass blades to flutter chaotically like a helicopter was hovering above them, Felix's glacial expression didn't change even a bit. "Where is your councilman?" Duchess Alina asked calmly. Felix lowered his head slowly and stared directly into her eyes for a few moments before answering with a flat tone, "He will be here when his fight is due. I am not here for chit-chat, let's sign the contracts." Without waiting for their response, Felix sat on his chair and picked up a holographic contract that was placed on the table. Seeing that Felix wasn't planning on engaging with them, Duchess Alina decided to be direct as well. "Queen Ai, please read the important terms of our joint contract to the public," she requested while enlarging the holographic contract for everyone to see. Queen Ai took a goddess-like giant holographic form and began reading with a stoic expression, "There is no surrender in the battles. They will end only when one party was proclaimed dead. If a party lost a battle, the nation represented will be forced to surrender in the war and will never target the winner party for the perpetuity of this contract." Naturally, Felix, Duchess Alina, and King Jagat had already met in private before the battles to make sure that the terms were approved of. Duchess Alina had placed her foot on the second term, so she would never need to worry about the Void Nation taking revenge on Felix when she killed him. Felix agreed to it, not caring too much about what the Void Nation would do if he died. Everything below legendary rank is allowed in those battles regardless of the quantity as long the parties own those items in their spatial card in the real universe. Only technological weapons and products are banned. Since divine equipments were considered as secret knowledge, this condition was coined in this manner to avoid bringing them. Since quantity was specified to be infinite, both parties made sure to prepare as much as they could in their spatial cards in the real world before joining the games. There is no time limit to the battles, however, the combatants are banned from going beyond the mountainous chain. Everyone knew that if such measure wasn't implanted, the battles would last forever if the players were allowed freedom of moving through the entire planet. After all, they were allowed to carry with them as much energy stones and healing products as possible. "This is all," Queen Ai requested, "please sign the contracts if you are satisfied with the terms." Duchess Alina and Felix stared at each other for a few moments without a single blink taking place. Just as the atmosphere was about to get too intense, they signed the contracts simultaneously and stood up. "I hope you have prepared enough." Duchess Alina smiled coldly, "I am not planning on simply killing you, I will make sure that you will go through the same torment you imposed on my people before I finish you off." Felix's fans and loved ones all felt chills course on their spines at her threat, knowing that she could do this without anyone being able to stop her. After all, there was no surrender on the table and the battle would end only when one of the combatant die. When the viewers saw Felix open his mouth slightly, they all perked their ears in anticipation at his retort, knowing that he was the best at them. However, Felix ended up merely murmuring expressionlessly, "Good luck." Felix's fans were left at loss for words, having no clue how to back up such a lousy response. Felix didn't care about anyone's reaction and teleported to his own seat in the arena. King Jagat and Duchess Alina also did the same with irritated looks, feeling like all of their plans to rattle Felix resulted in nothing. "The first battle will start in 2 minutes. Queen Ai announced, "It will be between the Gremlins King, Jagat, and Void Nation's Councilman, the Ruiner." Queen Ai might not be as great as MCS on hyping up the viewers, but she was still a good host. So, she didn't spend 2 minutes in silence but actually used them to introduce both fighters, starting with King Jagat. King Jagat is believed to be the strongest and most talented darkness elementalist to be born in this era. His current 17 Empyrean rank reflects his overwhelming strength as not a single gremlin in the history of the Alliance had broken past the top 50 ranks. With his overwhelming strength and charismatic personality, he was gifted the leadership of an important state in the Ogre-Savalan Empire by the royal Nubia family. After the royal Nubia prince rose to power and replaced the emperor, he began exerting his authority on all states with tyrannical demands. Only King Jagat rejected those demands for the sake of his people. This caused him to get stripped off his governing position and receive a heavy punishment for the sake of allowing the prince to establish his dominance on all other governors. King Jagat refused to accept such an unfair treatment and made himself into a fugitive. During his fugitive years in the empire, King Jagat founded a resistance with like-minded people, who were sick of the prince's tyranny. Under his leadership, the resistance had grown to an unstoppable power and ended up dethroning the prince and annihilating the entire royal Nubia family. As the leader of the resistance, King Jagat had become the new emperor of the Ogre-Savalan Empire. However, to remind himself and everyone about his true humble origin, he refused to call himself as an emperor, retaining his kingship. This has occurred 300,000 years ago. Queen Ai paused for a moment and teleported King Jagat back to the arena. Then, she concluded her speech with the same emotionless tone, "Now, King Jagat is here yet again to fight for his own people's freedom. King Jagat! King Jagat! King Jagat!" Without needing to ask them to chant, the gremlins and many other viewers exploded in emotional cheering as they looked at King Jagat's stoic expression. Besides the viewers who cared about history, the rest had absolutely no clue that King Jagat's story was this interesting. The majority expected him to be born into royalty like the majority of leaders. Queen Ai didn't care about the viewers' cheers and continued her introduction through the noise. On the opposite side, we have the Void Nation's councilman, the Ruiner. No further data is available, the battle will begin shortly. Queen Ai concluded her introduction, dumbfounding most of the viewers, who expected the all-knowing Queen Ai would throw them a bone about the Ruiner's identity or at least his appearance. Fortunately, they didn't have to wait for long to see the Ruiner, as the moment Queen Ai ended the introduction, she teleported him in front of King Jagat against his will. He resembled a giant demonic creature born from the depth of hell itself, with his two dark red horns on his forehead and long dark fangs protruding from his nightmarish mouth. His ungodly appearance scared most of the viewers into silence, feeling like the Ruiners would come get them if they cheered his opponent right in front of him. Under this unexpected silence, the Ruiner opened his mouth and spoke. "How dare you not ask for my permission?" The Ruiner narrowed his eyes murderously at Queen Ai's holographic form. "Do you wanna die? C*NT." No one knew how to react to the Ruiner's sudden snap at Queen Ai, as they merely kept staring at him with dumbfounded looks. "What the F***ck are you looking at? Have you never seen a god walking on mortally plane?" The Ruiner switched his aggression to the spectators after seeing everyone's looks. "This F***er is crazy. How is landlord even able to control him? Why do I have the feeling that he really means what he says?" Everyone was forced to gulp a mouthful in fear and lower their gazes after they made contact with the Ruiner, seeming like they were trying to avoid getting targeted by this crazy demon. While some believed that he was merely putting a front, Felix and the rest of the Void Nation knew that he was as serious as he could get. Even when he threatened Queen Ai, he would most definitely search for her servers and destroy them to prove his point. This meathead really needs a beating. Candace face-palmed as she sat with the rest of the councilmen, feeling slightly embarrassed by having her race represented by him. They were already having a bad image in the public due to their voidlings, now even the councilman was acting like a madman. "Well, keep wishing." Arthur chuckled, "As long as the primogenitors doesn't make a move personally on him, he can act as wild as he wants." "Eyes down here, you vulgar imbecile!" King Jagat said with an indifferent look, not affected in the slightest by the Ruiner's appearance or his persona. "Vulgar imbecile." The Ruiner slowly lowered his head and turned to face King Jagat with a creepy wide smile. He sized him up and down for a few moments and then said while licking his lips, "I was planning on just killing you to end this farce as quickly as possible, but I guess breaking your pride and devouring it isn't so bad either. It's been a while since I have added someone to my collection." Besides a few knowing viewers, the rest had absolutely no idea what the Ruiner was talking about. Even King Jagat was in the dark and thought that he was merely trying to get in his head. "Stop spouting nonsense and get ready to fight." King Jagat narrowed his eyes coldly as he took his battle stance. Unexpectedly, the Ruiner remained silent and just kept that creepy wide smile on his lips. The moment 2 minutes ended, Queen Ai ignored their trash talking and announced out loud, you have 20 seconds to teleport anywhere on your side of the arena and prepare yourself. When the times end, you are free to battle each other." The moment she finished speaking, King Jagat teleported hundreds of kilometers away from the ruiner. Then, he closed his eyes shut and mumbled under his breath, "Darkness Realm." Under the stunned eyes of the viewers, a sphere of darkness emerged on top of his palm. It was so dark, it resembled a tiny black hole. What is he going to do with THA? Just as Olivia was about to ask her teammates about it, the rest of the question was halted in her throat at sudden unbelieving sight emerging before her. The small darkness sphere expanded in the blink of an eye and covered more than 100 kilometers radius. The shocking part? It was still expanding at an insane pace under the stupefied looks of the viewers, who had never witnessed such thing before. Dear Lord, is this the true strength of the Alliance's inner circle leaders? Grandfather Robert murmured with a dazed expression while his pupils reflected nothing but absolute darkness. After the darkness realm reached the center of the arena, it stopped expanding forcefully like it had hit an invisible wall. If it wasn't for the preparation duration still ticking, it would have gone over to the other side and devoured even the ruiner. Tisk, this is the irritating ability that he used to escape from our grasp. Miriam clicked her tongue in irritation after recalling her fight with King Jagat. It might seem as if it's just a darkness field, but it's more than that. Mammon added with a serious tone, Jagat can move freely within his darkness field faster than even space elementalists with teleportation abilities. He can also turn his body into darkness energy and merge it with his field, making it impossible to hit him. We realized that unless we completely erase his darkness field, it's impossible to defeat him within it. When Felix heard so, he glanced at the darkness realm, that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, and he instantly knew that only mass destruction weapons or abilities could get rid of it. I was told that you are a void creature born out of the sin of pride. Suddenly, King Jagat spoke from within the darkness realm. His deep voice was somewhat soft, yet it was still heard distinctly in everyone's ears. What surprised most viewers was the fact that voice's source was impossible to pinpoint as it came from everywhere and kept echoing repeatedly. If you are so proud of your strength, I dare you to step inside my darkness realm. King Jagat provoked. Sounds like a drag. The ruiner lifted his pinky and cleared his right ear with an lazy expression. Then, without an ounce of hesitation, he walked towards the darkness realm, leaving behind him deep foot imprints with each step. After he reached the edge of the darkness realm, he was forcefully stopped by the invisible wall. 7, 6, 5. While Queen Ai counted down the end of the preparation phase, the ruiner merely lifted his finger above him and announced for all to hear, I summon the sin of pride for a clash of prides. Before anyone could react to hearing such nonsense, a gigantic violet symbol manifested out of nowhere above the ruiner. It resembled a mesmerizing violet peacock created out of many peculiar letters, which were never seen before. Just as the viewers wanted to react at this unique phenomena, their eyes were forced to look anywhere but the symbol. No matter how much they tried to look at it, their eyes refused to listen to their commands, scaring the living *T out of everyone. What's going on? Why can't I look at that symbol? Am I under a mental attack? Even King Jagat realized that after a mere 2 seconds of direct contact with the peacock symbol, his eyes refused to look at it again. When he focused on the ruiner instead, he was shocked to see him staring directly in his direction with the same creepy wide smile. Impossible! King Jagat refused to believe that the ruiner was able to see him from within his own darkness realm. That's because not a single vision ability was capable of seeing through his darkness realm when light particles were unable to enter it. Without light, all visions were deemed useless besides spatial ones. King Jagat was certain that even spatial vision wouldn't be able to help the ruiner since he had already merged his body with the darkness realm. 3, 2, 1. Queen Ai ignored everything ongoing and announced monotonously, fight. The instant the invisible wall was removed, King Jagat dropped all of his doubts at once and pushed the darkness realm to engulf the ruiner. The ruiner had no chance of escaping the darkness realm when he was so close to it before. You're dead. King Jagat smiled coldly while eyeing the ruiner standing nonchalantly inside his own world. Even the inner circle leaders believed that the ruiner was in a pinch, knowing the entering King Jagat's darkness realm was a death sentence. Unless he escapes through the void realm, it will be over for that idiot. Fisherman Queen Everly remarked. He is too proud to escape. Queen Alfreda stated calmly. Let's see then what he does to free him. Just as Minister Aqua Iris was about to join the conversation, the ruiner lifted his arm above his head while having his palm as straight as an arrow. Then, he brought it down swiftly until it reached the ground in a single motion. It might have been fast, but it was nothing extraordinary as even commoners managed to see his movement. The ruiner retracted his demonic arm back into a crossing position while still having that nonchalant look on his face even when nothing resulted from his action. Ha ha, that's it. Ha 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 ha. Just as the viewers were about to break into mocking laughter, the ruiner uttered a single word. Split. Then, there was no then, the arena, the mountainous chain, the darkness realm, and even the clouds were split apart like mosses splitting the sea for his people to pass through. Whether they were inner circle leaders or commoners, everyone was left with widened horrified eyes at this unimaginable scene, making them feel like they were in the presence of a true god. Crash! Boom! The noise followed instantly as mountains broke apart, trees were hurled in the air, and waterfalls imploding into clouds of rain. Meanwhile, the grass field was separated into two halves like an earthquake assaulted the arena and left a long chasm, leading to the abyss. As for the darkness realm, it was sliced from the center, showing everything on the other side. Everyone was left utterly stunned and honestly quite freaked out as nothing made sense out of the ruiner's attack. They would have been more accepting if he smashed the ground, used an elemental ability or anything that could result in such a godly destruction. Instead, the ruiner merely waved his arm down like he was chopping a board and everything split apart to fulfill his will. It was too illogical. Pride law is really something. Aspidicelone expressed with an intrigued look as he watched the battles stream in the council with the majority of the primogenitors. They would be fools to miss out on those two battles, which would almost never occur again. No kidding, the ruiner was born with a single pride law ability, and it already turned him into one of the strongest beings in the universe. Siren said with a fascinated tone. All other unique void creatures were born with a single law ability based on their sin. Wrathful creators were able to give birth to nightmarish voidlings by using their wrath and void energy as fuel. Jinns were capable of granting wishes by taking advantage of their target's greed and receiving a similar wish for their utilization. Void succubi could invade the dreams anyone they wanted and use their lust law to turn them into sex slaves. Imitators could copy any individual in this universe below their spiritual level and obtain their unique cultivation system and other innate abilities. Dreamers were able to use their sloth law ability to consume the dreams of their targets and turn them into sustainable energy for growth. Symbiotes were similar in that manner as their gluttony law ability helped them consume anything out of substance in the universe and turn it into energy for growth. As for annihilation fiends, they also possessed a single law ability and it was none other than the clash of prides. This ability was a double-edged sword as it allowed the annihilation fiends to base their battle on just pride. While the viewers had no idea what the symbol meant, they were forced to take part of the challenge the moment their eyes landed on it. The challenge was simple, they needed to keep staring at the symbol for a longer duration than the ruiner. As seen from before, no one managed to keep their eyes on the symbol for more than 2 seconds, even the inner circle leaders were forced to look in different direction against their own will. The only ones passing the test were the Hive Empress, Metal Empress, Elder Dragon, Asna, Nimmo, and obviously all primogenitors watching the stream. Even Felix failed to match the ruiner's insane self-pride. Too bad for King Jagat, he was the one facing the ruiner and not them, which meant that only his results mattered. He lost just as bad as the rest of the inner circle leaders. The clash of prides, I thought he wouldn't bother to use it and rely on his standardized strength in his battle. Saurus sighed as he stared at the violet peacock symbol without an issue. Since he used it, it looks like he's aiming to break Jagat's pride and devour it to further enhance his strength. Erebus said. Can he do that even in the UVR? Kumiho titled her head in confusion. Let's watch and see. Aspidakelone said as looked at the ruiner who was walking on air through the chasm he created. Meanwhile, King Jagat was peeking at him while his heart was pounding like a set of drums. The previous attack didn't hurt him physically since he was one with the darkness realm, but his mind was frightened silly. How is this bastard so stupidly strong? Even Elder Dragon wouldn't be able to do that without much momentum. King Jagat thought to himself while completely hiding himself, not daring to let out a squeak anymore. He was warned all right that the ruiner was freakishly strong, and he should be careful, but he still was caught off guard. I must switch to offense and go all out before he makes any other moves. Without delay, King Jagat beamed his legendary weapon, Orb of Night. It was a small hexagon-shaped orb the size of soccer ball, each hexagon face was embedded with a pitch-black futhark. King Jagat tightened his grasp on the orb and commanded coldly, Kill mode, activate. The orb opened slightly and began sucking in all the darkness around it like a hungry hippo. In less than a second, countless long darkness blades emerged from the orb's slits. King Jagat neither threw the orb nor pointed at the ruiner, he merely commanded it coldly, decapitate him. The orb of night disappeared from its place and emerged above the chasm, where the darkness had yet to cover again. What is that? Is that an ability? Looks like an artifact. The orb of night was spotted instantly by everyone, drawing varied reaction due to its weird appearance. What is this toy? The ruiner said curiously as he eyed the speeding orb in his direction. Toy. King Jagat snickered, this is a customized legendary artifact forged by the previous dwarves' emperor himself. It's able to slice anyone apart as long as they were touched by darkness. I dare him to call it a toy after this. Whoosh whoosh. Abruptly, the darkness walls on both sides of the chasm began to vibrate and wave like an ocean in a storm. Then, hundreds of dark tentacles surged from them and assaulted the ruiner simultaneously. They caught his limbs, neck, and even torso, forcing him to halt in his place. The orb of night was getting nearer and nearer to the ruiner's neck. Duchess Alina and the others, who knew about the true horror of this artifact, could already imagine the ruiner's neck getting sliced apart. Yet, the ruiner didn't even bat an eyelid as he stared directly at the incoming orb that was merely a few meters away from his neck. Just as King Jagat's smirk was about to widen, it was stiffened halfway through at the chilling sight before him. Oh! How? His brain had suffered from a short circuit, as he eyed his orb of night stuck inside the darkness tentacle around the ruiner's neck. It was trying its best to pass through the darkness tentacle and emerge on the other side, but no matter how much it span, it was unable to move an inch. Looks like your ancestor hasn't told you enough about me or the law of pride. The ruiner spoke casually while reaching out to the orb of night with his hand like the darkness tentacle had absolutely no strength over him. He caught the small orb with his giant hand, making it seem like he was holding into marble dot. Then, he placed it between his thumb and index finger and aimed it directly at where King Jagat was hiding. Phew! Just like a child playing with marbles, he launched it akin to a bullet. Before King Jagat could break out of his shock, the orb of night sliced him up from his waist as smoothly as cutting butter. Fortunately, he was in his base transmutation form, helping him escape from harm again. Yet, the ruiner didn't seem to worry about it at all. He merely extended his arm forward and had his hand turned into a claw while facing King Jagat. Like hell I will stay near you. Although King Jagat had no clue what the ruiner was doing, he was too agitated by what happened to feel safe in his position. So, he instantly teleported to the edges of the darkness realm, putting over 300 kilometers away from the ruiner. Without change of expression, the ruiner merely turned his claw in King Jagat's direction again and ordered indifferently, "Bring him over." Abruptly, King Jagat felt sudden tightness across his entire body. Impossible! Impossible! This is illogical. This shocked him silly like nothing before as he knew exactly what it meant. Stop! 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 He kept shouting his mind like a madman while his transmutation was forcefully being cancelled against his will. In less than a second, his physical body was restored within the darkness realm, yet, the nightmare wasn't over yet for King Jagat. The moment his body was restored, his own darkness realm rebelled against him and covered him entirely with darkness tentacles, making him unable to move an inch. What the hell is going on? Cancel! Cancel! King Jagat screamed like a maniac to cancel his own darkness realm. Yet, no matter how loud he screamed, his own ability refused to listen to his elemental manipulation. While he was losing his marbles at this inconceivable situation, the darkness tentacles instantly brought him in front of the ruiner's extended claw. They positioned his neck right in his claw precisely like they didn't want him to sweat a drop. Release him and get out my sight! The ruiner ordered nonchalantly. Just like an obedient puppet, the darkness realm retracted its tentacles and broke into black particles, returning the arena to its peaceful appearance under the dumbfounded looks of the viewers. Do you understand now? As long as the pride symbol stand above me and no one can contest against my pride, I own everything in this arena. The ruiner smiled faintly as he looked directly into King Jagat's fearful eyes. Then, he moved closer to him and whispered word by word with his creepy demonic smile, to the last particle. Before King Jagat could process such a disgustingly strong power, the ruiner tightened his claw on his neck and then threw him against the chasm's wall. Boom! King Jagat smashed through the rocks like he was hurled by a cannon, stopping only after he created 100 meters long trail on the chasm's wall. Cough! Cough! He hadn't lost consciousness, but he ended up coughing blood like a broken fountain, suffering from major internal injuries. I need to get away. King Jagat beamed a rank 5 healing potion and gulped it down. His injuries were gone instantly like he was touched by the light goddess herself. The chasm's darkness. It's made out of laws, he can't control it too. King Jagat swiftly allowed his body to fall to the depth of the abyss, believing that natural darkness shouldn't be under the ruiner's commands. Unfortunately, the instant he merged with it, the same darkness tentacles manifested around him and captured him like a helpless prey. No! No! You monster! King Jagat could only cry with a clear horror on his face as he got delivered back to the ruiner's grasp. Stop trying to escape and just kneel down before my greatness. I might give you merciful death then. The ruiner stated indifferently as he looked directly into King Jagat's eyes. F***CKU. King Jagat spat in his face hatefully and beamed 5 scrolls around him. When Felix and Arthur zoomed on the writings, they both exclaimed simultaneously, 4 epic explosive scrolls and 1 legendary. They immediately figured out that King Jagat planned to blow himself with the ruiner after he realized that it was impossible to win this battle when even his element was against him. As a king of an entire race, there was no way he would let himself get humiliated under the eyes of the entire universe. Without an ounce of hesitation, he activated them while shouting out loud, "Let's go to hell together!" The ruiner merely glanced nonchalantly at the surrounding scrolls, which had their runic letters light up brilliantly with an orange color. Then, boom! An explosion with the force of 100 Hiroshima nukes went off in the center of the arena. It was so destructive and forceful, it reached even the holographic viewers in the sky, forcing them to guard themselves reflexively. After the flames settled up, a cloud mushroom rose up much higher and hid the crater for all to see. Did it work? Duchess Alina swiftly used her omnipotent vision to look straight inside the cloud mushroom with a hopeful expression. Hey? How? Her hopes crumbled immediately after spotting the ruiner floating within a humongous crater that was deep enough it resembled a natural bowl. The shocking part? He was still holding into King Jagat by the neck. Disperse! Abruptly, the ruiner's voice thundered in everyone's ears, forcing them to open their eyes to the sight of the mushroom cloud getting blown off by the wind. In an instant, the ruiner and King Jagat were seen under the eyes of the viewers without a single scratch on them. The only things changed were the arena's state and King Jagat's complexion. His face was a white as sheet paper as he kept staring at the ruiner's nonchalant expression. How is this even possible? Gulp, is he really a god like he said? He must have used a scroll or an ability. Must be. While the spectators were losing their sh*t at such an unimaginable sight, King Jagat had front seat row on what exactly had occurred at the moment of the explosion. He knew that even if he told others, no one would believe him. Who could blame him? The moment explosion occurred, it had expanded everywhere around the ruiners and him like they were inside an invisible barrier. But in reality, it was just the particles defying their physics and refusing to touch the ruiner and his prey based on his orders. Even the heat hadn't reached them like they were isolated in a different dimension. This was the true terror of law's manipulation compared to merely elemental manipulation. Just one ability from the pride laws allowed the ruiner to turn into a true god. Why am I here? Why am I facing this fiend? Was I forsaken by my ancestor? Ha ha ha, it must be. They knew that I was never going to win against this demon and he still threw me off. After everything I did, after all the hard work and sh*t I went through for him, he disposed of me like this just for a chance to kill a human? Ha ha ha. King Jagat started laughing out loud like a maniac after finally realizing his true worth in the eyes of his ancestor. A mere tool to fulfill Wendigo's desires. The more King Jagat lost it, the bigger the ruiner creepy grin had gotten. It's good that you finally figured out your truth. The ruiner joined him in his maniacal laughter. You are worth jack share *t. You're nothing but a mere toy to gods like us. So, tell me, how dare a toy have pride in itself? King Jagat felt his pride being hammered with each insult thrown at him by the ruiner. He wanted to retort, but he found nothing to defend himself. His most prized darkness manipulation betrayed him in the blink of an eye. His ancestors sacrificed him without an ounce of emotion. Now, even external items such as scrolls were also siding with the ruiner. He felt like his existence amounted to absolutely nothing and his so-called pride was a mere joke before true gods. Kneel before me as an apology and I will give you a merciful death. The ruiner kept pressing. No. King Jagat's pride might have cracked, but it was still not broken. No. The ruiner's smile turned colder and said, let's see how long you will hold out. Before King Jagat could react, the ruiner held him by the foot and teleported to the bottom of the crater. Boom boom boom. Just like Hulk smashing Loki in Tony Stark's tower, the ruiner kept bashing King Jagat's left and right, leaving deep imprints in the ground. When he finished, he lifted King Jagat back up, showing a miserable appearance, which no one would have imagined it would associate with an honorable leader in the Alliance inner circle. How about now? The ruiner asked again. Oh, no. King Jagat replied with great difficulty when his entire mouth and throat was busted open. You must be betting on dying after going through this torture. The ruiner grinned creepily while bringing King Jagat near his face. King Jagat remained quiet, but it was clear to all that he was betting on that. Too bad, you will die only when I allow it. The ruiner snapped his finger and ordered, heal him. Just like a magic show, King Jagat's shattered body was recovered instantly to its peak form after a wave of light passed through him. Let's start round 2. The ruiner smiled coldly and instantly began smashing King Jagat again on the ground under the stunned and horrified looks of the viewers. This is too much, can Berserth even beat him? Queen Alfreda frowned as she glanced at Elder Dragon, who was watching this one-sided beatdown with a neutral expression. No one knew what was going through his mind at the moment. Thank God we have decided to include them in the alliance. The Spider-Kin's Princess Meralia sighed in relief, feeling more safe by having this monster on their side. Let's put a pin on that. Fisherman Queen narrowed her eyes at the current gruesome torture. He is clearly an evil lunatic. Most of the viewers thought the same as they kept watching the ruiner beat down King Jagat to his last breath just to heal him back to peak, and then repeat the process. In each time, the ruiner asked to have King Jagat kneel. This kept on going for more than an hour until most gremlins dropped out of the stream, not able to take it anymore. As for the rest of the viewers, every one of them started wishing for King Jagat to just do as the Ruiner wanted and end this diabolical torture. How about now? The Ruiner asked King Jagat, whose appearance was beyond disfigured. I will do it. I guess round 214 it is. Hey, you agreed. The Ruiner sounded a bit disappointed when he realized that King Jagat finally tapped out. Thud. Ah, whatever, I guess 1 hour of fun is enough. He threw him on the ground and healed him back to peak, not worried in the slightest that King Jagat would pull a fast one on him. He didn't need to be worried as King Jagat truly had enough of such meaningless torture. His pride was already broken a long while ago when he realized that no one was going to save him and the Ruiner had no issues of spending years torturing him. The fact that he couldn't even kill himself was another blow. Still, he was motivated by another reason to kneel down before the Ruiner. If I am going down, I might as well humiliate that F***er with me. King Jagat thought coldly as he envisioned Wendigo's face. So, under the eyes of his people, his peers, his enemies, and most importantly, his ancestor, King Jagat knelt down before the Ruiner with his eyes closed shut. The moment he did so, visible violet aura began emitting from his skin and heading towards the peacock symbol. Then, it was transferred to the Ruiner and disappeared within him. This is it. How long have I missed this wonderful feeling? Ha 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 ha. The Ruiner started laughing maniacally while raising his arms in the sky. What in the hell? The viewers were stunned speechless by the sight of his giant body growing bigger at a noticeable pace. This wasn't all as his horns turned longer, his fangs sharper, and most visibly, his muscles more defined. Thud. While everyone's eyes were on the Ruiner's visible growth, no one noticed King Jagat, who fell face down on the ground with an extremely aged appearance like he had exhausted all of his longevity. This was the Ruiner's goal all along. He wasn't forcing King Jagat to kneel to uplift his ego but to absorb his broken pride. As Annihilation Fiend, this was the only method for them to grow stronger. That's why they kept destroying civilizations in the past as they targeted kings and queens' pride for the sake of absorbing it and growing stronger. After the violet aura stopped releasing from his body, King Jagat closed his wrinkly soulless eyes shut and turned into fine dust. This exactly what happened to his body in the real world even though he was logged in the UVR. Whether one was in an illusion, virtual world, or real world, the moment they give up on their pride before an annihilation fiend, only this fate awaited them. Ha 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 ha. I should have come sooner from retirement. Who's next? Who's next? Is it that vampire girl? Come down here and let's have some fun. The Ruiner kept yelling thunderously with an aroused expression like he had just felt the greatest orgasm in his life, not knowing that the entire audience and stream were as silent as deserted graveyard. Who's next? Congratulations to the Void Nation. King Jagat has been slain, the battle is over. Fortunately for Duchess Alina, Queen AI came to the rescue as she teleported the Ruiner outside the arena against his will again after this announcement. *TCH. I was just starting. The moment the Ruiner opened his eyes next to Felix and the rest of the councilmen, he exploded into another frenzy, cursing the living shit out of Queen AI. That's enough, Ruiner. Felix said calmly, you have done enough, and it's my time to fight for the nation. Fine. The Ruiner crossed his arms with an irritated expression and quietened down. He might be much stronger than Felix and more proud than him, but he still listened to his orders and requests for a simple reason: he was confident that his god would never choose a nobody to be taking care of him. The next battle will be held in half an hour break. May the next combatants prepare for it. Queen AI announced again. Well, the first battle has ended as we have anticipated. Saurus said as he glanced at Wendigo, who didn't seem too pleased by the image of King Jagat kneeling before another. It was extremely humiliating for him when he was watching the game with the majority of his peers. Yes, it did. Wendigo replied with a suppressed chilling tone. If only his pride was equal to the ruiner, the peacock symbol would have bestowed them both with complete domination of the surrounding laws. Manananggal shook his head. Clash of Prides was a double-edged sword for this exact reason. The peacock symbol was fair in judging everyone's genuine pride in themselves. If Elder Dragon was against the ruiner in this clash, they would have most definitely matched their prides. This would in turn make them both a temporarily gods in a limited area. If somehow Elder Dragon's pride was higher than the ruiner, then, he would end up getting dominated just as badly as King Jagat by his own ability. That's why Annihilation Fiends never rush to use this ability unless they were certain that their pride is much higher than their target. However, because the only method of them getting stronger was by using this ability and absorbing their target's pride, they were forced to take risks and choose individuals with high pride. After all, breaking a nobody's pride would give a meager reward compared to breaking the pride of a king. All in all, it was an extremely overpowered ability, but it was fair and fraught with risks that had caused many Annihilation Fiends to end up killed in the old times. There is no ifs anymore, what's done is done. Wendigo narrowed his eyes coldly, it will be all worth it when I see that punk getting turned into cloud of blood. Alina won't disappoint us, we have prepared too much for this moment. Manananggal assured. She better be. While the Darkin faction primogenitors were putting all of their hopes on her, Duchess Alina was meditating in peace to get rid of the horrific image of the ruiner's torture out of her mind. She might not admit it out loud, but her confidence was shaken to the core by such an unforgivable sight. She honestly thanked God she wasn't selected to face against him. But at the same time, that one-sided slaughter had woken her up. If I want to win my fight, I need to take it as seriously as possible. Duchess Alina kept breathing in and out regularly, trying her best to cleanse her mind from all the hate and anger she had towards Felix. She planned earlier on torturing and humiliating Felix, but now? She wasn't going to screw around and end him in the first opportunity she obtained. Felix also spent this half-hour break to revising his plan as it was quite too complex this time even for him. Meanwhile, the aftermath of King Jagat's death was taking place in real time and was streamed for everyone to watch. It wasn't pretty in the slightest. Whether the Void Nation win or lose the next battle, they have already succeeded in getting rid of two major races in the alliance. Einir sighed while sitting with Selphie and his cousins in the arena. He had both wisps of consciousness logged in simultaneously and watching the battles with his Void Nation and his royal family. Unlike Arthur, he had yet to get exposed as the recording shown in the council was from Arthur's perspective. He modified it to show only clips of primogenitors to not expose Einir. Since Einir's identity wasn't significant and could affect the war in any shape or form, Duchess Alina didn't spare him even a second of her time to expose him. As disrespectful as it was, Einir wasn't complaining. What do you mean whether they win or lose their next battle? Selphie eyed him frigidly. Felix is going to win it. There is no other option. Understood. Yes. Einir's eyelids twitched. You psycho. Baron, Eleanor, Kerwin, and Moana could only glance at each other with slightly worried looks at Selphie's behavior. Ever since Felix was exposed as the Void Nation's leader, they witnessed Selphie's personality drastically change from a gentle and loving to a silent and distant. It was like her kind personality conflicted with her love for Felix after finding out that his nation was committing mass genocides in the war. If she was a human, no matter how much she loved Felix, she would forsake him if he went against her beliefs and moral standards. Unfortunately, she was an elf. Her love was no different from obsession that could be freed only if she was betrayed personally by Felix. This inner conflict between her love and morals kept stressing Selphie out to the point she stopped being herself, even lashing at her cousins whenever they criticized Felix in this war. The fact that Felix had refused to meet or talk to her due to his shame made it even worse. Fortunately, her love for Felix ended up prevailing at last after she realized that Felix took no joy in those deaths and was willing to sacrifice himself to finish this over a battle. Though, this created another conflict in her mind as Felix's safety in this battle was far from guaranteed. The fact that only death could end this fight made it even harder for Selphie to cope up with her emotions. Let's stop bringing up Felix's death. Elnora gulped a mouthful. I have a bad feeling that if Felix really died, she would vent it on us. I second that. Baron said, I would rather not be frozen in time. The rest nodded in understanding and stopped discussing anything related to this battle, leaving them to stare at Selphie as she kept murmuring prayers for Felix's safety. She was praying to none other than her mother. Her concerned reaction was shared by Felix's grandfather and his loved ones. In fact, most humans prayed for Felix's victory, knowing that if he died, their race was going to return to its **TTY situation yet again. Felix was a beacon of hope for them. They were sure that a better future would unfold under his leadership, similar to the way he pushed their rank to 25. So, plenty of hopes and wishes were lying on Felix's shoulders. He knew all of this, but he didn't allow it to affect him. He merely kept revising his plan in silence without an ounce of emotional instability. Before long, Queen Ai announced out loud, the battle will begin in 2 minutes. Both Duchess Alina and Felix opened their eyes simultaneously. Neither rage, hate, agitation, nor any emotions were reflected in their pupils. The only thing reflected was absolute stillness like a peaceful lake in spring. Then, they uttered simultaneously with great conviction. I will kill him. I will kill her.